Township to a clean and renewable energy source. As I have mentioned in my previous month's remarks, Radnor is continuing to release articles to keep students occupied during this time. The articles released this month have been both serious and funny, showcasing the writing and hard work of Radnor students. Andrew Rosen, the Radish editor, wrote a comical piece, Administration, People Will Die in This Year's Senior Assassin Game, highlighting the new risks that are associated with playing Senior Assassin during lockdown. Allie Bauer, hitting on a more serious note, wrote the piece titled, Thank You Health Heroes, showing appreciation for the healthcare workers on the front lines during the pandemic. She reiterates the importance of staying home for the sake of not only ourselves, but for the workers in the overloaded hospitals. On one final note, I wanted to express some student reactions to recent changes in the fourth marking period grading. I'll leave their names out, but I'll still express what they said. Many have said that they personally like the idea, emphasizing that it lessens the stress caused by online schooling. Another student said they are indifferent, but also expressed a tint of frustration. The student says that despite the change, they are going to continue to be a hard worker, but they are going to get less of a reward for the hard work given the lessened weight of the fourth marking period. And they're going to be surrounded by students who are going to take advantage of the situation by, quote, slacking off. One final student expressed their appreciation for having more time to spend with their family. Overall, the consensus is approval from the students, as they're going to have time to engage in activities that they otherwise wouldn't have the time to. I'm now going to turn it over to Austin so he can further talk about online schooling, as he wasn't able to join us last time.
Hello everyone, I hope all of you are healthy and well. Last meeting I unfortunately couldn't attend, as Avery said, and I know she shared her thoughts on online schooling, so I'll give it a go too. We've been home for around 47 days, including weekends, and have been learning electronically for about 6 weeks. At first, picking up the pace of the work was difficult because students had just come from the abrupt break starting on Friday, March 13th. Teachers were also learning how to assess the situation, so the amount of work fluctuated from heavy loads to minimal assignments. Since week 2 or 3, online learning has been smooth sailing. For me, I've encountered a few hiccups with some teachers because teaching myself information doesn't always suffice, but thankfully Big Blue Button has fixed most of those issues. I would also like to mention Radnor High School's math department, because I find that they've orchestrated the learning process the best by giving pre-recorded video lectures of the lesson that would have been in school. Now that we're sadly not returning the school year, student government has, as a whole, brainstormed ideas for this year's student elections. We configured a plan that follows the traditional pattern of petitioning and running for office, but with a virtual twist. On Wednesday, April 22nd, executive candidates had to submit their petition forms consisting of 3 student references, and on April 24th, executive speeches were held over a recorded Zoom call and then distributed to students today to vote upon. For class officer elections, the petition forms are due tomorrow, the 29th, followed by a recorded Zoom call on May 1st and voting on the 6th of May. After winners of the first round of voting are announced for both elections, runoff elections will occur Thursday, May 7th, and our student leaders will be confirmed on May 8th. As far as individual class student governments go, the freshman class has postponed all planning until the new officials are announced. The sophomore class has halted planning as well, other than the back and forth, what are you running for next year? The junior class is discussing a substitute for junior prom and brainstorming LME week with possible themes, and the graduating seniors are sad their year ended so quickly, but are planning to have their senior prom and graduation. I'm happy to see you all here and anxious to be able to talk in person again. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Avery. And it sounds like you guys are really doing your best under really challenging circumstances. So I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear things are going, for the most part, pretty well up at the high school. Okay, now we're going to move right into our report from our superintendent, Mr. Batchelor.
Thank you. And thank you, Avery and Austin. Again, it's great to see both of you. It's great to have a meeting and get a chance to see everyone. We did have some struggles with our audio in the beginning of this meeting, but we think everything is working well now. So we apologize for those people who are watching the meeting from home. We had some glitches with the audio, but I think everything's working well now. Before I begin, I just want to recognize and to our community and to everyone on our staff and in our Radnor community, to those families that have been impacted by this virus. It is unfortunate that we're at a point now in our country where I think we all know someone, and some have been close family members for many people in our community who have been directly impacted by it. Our hearts and thoughts are with you, and for those of you who have loved ones who are struggling with it. And also for those people in our community that are working every day, to help combat what's going on in our country. We think, I believe the heroes in our country are emerging, and those heroes in our country in this crisis are emerging because it's our healthcare workers, it's our sanitation workers, our food market employees, our factory workers, our first responders, our essential supports that keep our electricity, our technology and infrastructure working. And it's also everyone in education. It's all of our teachers and everyone in education that is keeping our buildings running. Those schools closed. We have continued. We have continued with our educational program, though our buildings are closed. And it has been just an impressive amount of work from so many people to do what we've been doing. I think one of a high school teacher actually shared with me, and I shared this last week, superintendent in another state referred to this time period as emergency learning. And I think that is a fair assessment of what really began here was emergency learning for all of us, and how quickly could we turn around and continue with our educational program literally overnight. But I'm happy to say that thanks to the efforts of so many, it's moving beyond emergency learning. It's moving beyond just how do we make sure we educate, but also how do we continue to do this well, and how do we as a community continue to improve as we do this. During our first week, when we had the first week of closure, we had a priority to try to get technology to all those families that we knew didn't have technology. During that second week, we then made it a priority to get technology out to our families that needed additional technology. If you had 2 or 3 kids and just one computer, we knew there was going to be struggles and challenges. So we worked very hard to get that technology out to families, and then also start to get technology then out to our elementary students who maybe needed additional technology. We also have had a plan to make sure that our teachers had the right technology. Thanks to the support of our school board, we were able to make some purchases early on to move along our purchasing cycle for technology that we plan to do in the next 2 years. We did right away several weeks ago, and some of that technology has already arrived, and some of that technology is now in the hands of our teachers and gives our teachers better ability to be teaching from home. So as we've continued to move forward, our administrative team has been working hard to try to remove the roadblocks for our teachers, to provide the professional development necessary, to identify the platforms that would work best in trying to give not only the instructional supports, but also to give that live teacher support. And I'm happy to share that, we have been gradually moving towards more opportunities for live teacher support, sessions K to 12. And as you heard from Avery and Austin, it is those opportunities for those live sessions that have become really powerful, I think, for our students and for our teachers. One teacher shared with me recently just that opportunity to see all their students and to see their faces live really brought them hope and excitement. So I hope our students are taking those opportunities seriously as well, too. I mean, I'm glad to hear our students are tuning in for those opportunities when our teachers can be live to provide some support. While we began this, we don't know what the right balance is to how much should we be live with our teachers all the time versus how much should our kids be live all the time. What is the right balance? And we're working very hard to try to, look at what is that right balance. We have found through the feedback that a lot of the videos our teachers are making, like Austin talked about with our math department, we're seeing great success with those videos because the teachers plan a video, the kids have time to watch it, they have time to rewatch it. Now with the live teacher support, there's an opportunity for the kids to ask questions and work with their teachers. So we're going to work hard to try to find what is that right balance. As we're working hard to make that right balance and do what we can with our program, it's also becoming an exciting opportunity for us in education. As hard as this has been for so many, as hard as it's been for our teachers who are home with their kids and trying to manage their own children's education and also the education of their classes, it also is becoming what I refer to as our Apollo 13 moment. I had an opportunity to share on April 13th. It was 50 years to the day when the oxygen tanks ruptured on Apollo 13. And I guess I'm, with my kids, we're watching a lot of movies now, and I'm looking for good family movies. So Apollo 13 is a great family movie. And there's a great scene in that movie where the NASA astronauts reenact that crisis for Apollo 13. And when they dumped out everything on the table and said, these are what they have up there in that modular, and we've got to figure out how to get them oxygen. We've been at that point in education right now. We went online. We have a lot of tools, a lot of training. There's a lot of things that we know about pedagogy and content and how to teach, but now we had to figure out how can we do it online and what's the best way to do it online. I give so much credit to our teachers, our administrators, our students, and our parents for all that they're doing to be flexible and to work with us as we figure out what is the best way to educate our kids and what is that right balance with all of the instructional expertise that we have within this district. So we're going to continue to evolve. There's going to be trial and error, just like in Apollo 13. We're not perfect. We're not going to get it right away, but we're going to continue through trial and error to continue to grow and improve in this process. And I think out of it, as an educational institution, there's going to be, as the dust starts to settle, and for some of us, we're starting to talk about that now, what are the things that are going to improve our practices moving forward? We're excited to think about how does the videos that we're doing now. I had a recent parent who their child is legally blind, and they talked about how this opportunity and the videos that our teachers are creating, how they're actually helping with the education of their child, and that how some of the resources now that our teachers are putting up and making available that our kids can go back and look at. She's talking about how this could really be a moment to help her as a parent with somebody who has special needs. So I think there's a lot that we're going to be able to learn as an educational institution that we're going to take away from this as the dust begins to settle. Obviously, we're still in the midst of the crisis. We're still in the midst of working very hard. I think one of the funniest videos that is going around right now, if you haven't seen it, it's the music teacher who sets up a song she's writing about what online education is like. And she starts off so lovely with the chords, and it looks like she's going to write this really wonderful song, and then she just starts screaming. It did resonate with me as I think about all that's going on in my house with my children, all that's going on with trying to keep work going. But I'm just so proud of the work that so many are doing. And I'm also so proud of the conversations that are starting to happen with teachers about where can we take this? Where can we take this when this is all over? And what does this look like for us in the fall? We don't know. We don't have answers for the fall. We don't have answers for still some of the questions. Mrs. Kevgis is with us tonight to talk a little bit about what we're doing with our seniors. And we've been thinking of so much about our seniors and how we can continue to support them. And what does this mean for the end of the year activities? And we're going to talk a little bit about that later tonight. But there have been, as I said, there's been some exciting things. And if you could, I want to talk about the numbers for a little bit. And usually I don't have long presentations, but I do want to share some information. So Chris, if you could share your screen and just share the PowerPoint. And the first PowerPoint where it just talks about some of the things that we've been doing as a district. And for all I know, you've maybe been sharing that already for the live streaming. So go ahead to the next slide there, picture, Chris. So I wanted to just talk about, I already had a chance to talk about our online, but I want to talk a little bit about our meal distribution, our technology department, and our commitment towards continuous improvement. As a district, we're going to continue to have a commitment to continuous improvement as we move forward. So let's look at just some of the numbers just quickly. So if you go to the next slide for me, Chris. So since this has begun, and Avery and Austin talked about how many days we've been doing this and how long this has been going. So 30,439 course materials have been created since this began. I won't read all this to you. I'll just flash some of these stats up on the screen for you. 102,895 course materials submitted. Our students are working hard. We've been trying to adjust based on what we're hearing from our students. I know, for some it was too much at first, for others it wasn't enough. Please, parents, students, continue to give your teachers feedback. Let them know what your struggles are. Let them know what's working well. Our teachers are eager to hear from you and are eager to make those adjustments. We've had 23,149 Schoology messages sent since we began. Chris, if you could go to the next slide. We've been distributing 6,886 meals. Our cafeteria staff, along with the support of our some of our bus drivers, have been just doing incredible work coming in. It's around 1,300 meals a week that they're providing for our students in our community, and it's just incredible what they've been doing. We've deployed 791 devices since the start of this. We've bagged 1,500 worth of students' items. So at the elementary level and other areas, but especially at the elementary level, we have bagged up all the students' materials. Our staff were so gracious in their willingness to come in, bag up their students' belongings into plastic bags, label all the books and materials, and then our principals set up pickup points so our parents could drive up and pick up those materials. Chris, could you go to the next slide? Donations, you see the overwhelming amount of donations that has been given as a community. The outpouring from our community to support others in need has been just truly, it's been touching. It's wonderful to be part of such a caring community here in Radnor. 77 messages to staff and families. I have heard that, you know, some people are a little tired of Mr. Batchelor's messages, so luckily those have started to slow down a little bit, but there has been a lot of communication, and I have heard from parents very thoughtfully. They say, we're tired of the emails, so we are trying to look for other ways to try to communicate besides emails, because I think we're all being inundated with way too many emails right now. And then you see 34,000 page reviews. When you look at, we monitor both our website, but we also monitor the links within our website, and we keep updating our frequently asked questions, and we keep updating our information about our instructional program and the information about our closing. And we see that there's a lot of parents and students who are following that closely. If you go to the next slide there. So the next slide, this is a slide I wanted to take a moment to make some personal thank you and personal recognitions. We have had just an incredible, outpouring of support from all of our staff, as I've talked about. But the people on this screen, I'd like to make a special thank you to and give a recognition to our food service staff, our transportation staff, and our social workers for their community support to Radnor community during this extended closure. Since Pennsylvania schools were ordered closed by Governor Wolf, beginning March 16, 2020, Radnor's Township School District has made every effort to continue operation and instruction to mitigate the impact of the closure. On the front lines of this effort has been numerous technology staff, food service staff, transportation staff, and social workers who have been present and working under safe conditions to ensure families in need can obtain instructional devices and meals on a daily basis. For their selfless work and dedication to the Radnor community, we as a district are just so proud to commend our technology staff members, and you can see their pictures on the screen there. Chris Augustine, Libby Corman, Roseanne Deegan, Virginia Glatzer, Tony Hoffman, Nancy Holshoe, Foley Hurt, Marion Lacavaro, Stacy Lutholtz, Byron McCook, Kate McKenna, Barbara Orsini, Charles Ragusa, Edna Simon, Chung Sang, and Sue Omer. From our food service staff members, you can see pictures of them giving out the food, to our students and our families. Members there, you can see some of their faces behind the masks. It's Kim Bond, Beth Cook, Sarah Cooper, Marianne Delaterio, Russell Dilks, Margaret Larkin, Judy Militello, and Mina Rabi. And Mina has pictures in there. Mina was making and sewing many of the masks for our staff. So we thank Mina for providing those masks. Our transportation staff members, you can see pictures of Quentin Horton and Jack Shea there, who show up not only to help, but to also show up to deliver food or technology to our families that are unable to come pick things up. And then our social workers, we have pictures at the bottom right there, Keir Evans and Christine Culp, who have just from the very beginning have been providing, working closely with, our PTOs who have been raising dollars, with our Radnor Education Foundation, with our Neighbors Helping Neighbors. They work very closely with as our parents who want to give, to support, REF, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, or our PTOs are great places you can give to. And then our social workers work closely to get gift cards to our community members most in need, our family members. So while all of our staff and employees have displayed incredible resolve and flexibility during this unprecedented time, We want to employ all of them, and all these above employees through their regular physical presence in our schools have provided a foundation on which the rest of our work as a district is sustained. You know, we've had a saying, we're all in this together, and that saying certainly couldn't be more true, you know, today than any other day. It was the theme for our, when we had our LM celebration at the high school. We're all in it together was the song our seniors sang, and what an appropriate song that our seniors sang this year as we look at this crisis and all being in it together. So again, I can't thank enough all of our staff who have been working so hard, and especially recognition to those who have been coming here each day to make sure behind the scenes that the technology gets out, the meals are delivered. So thank you to all of them. To our next slide there, Chris, if you could move us along. So we will talk about the calendar later today. So this is another topic with a lot of questions. For people who are just chiming in, community members who are listening to this presentation, if you recall, this was the first year we built in 4 snow days. So we built in 4 snow days this year. What we did not use, what I would do to have to deal with snow days right now would be a wonderful trade-off. So we said last year we built in those 4 snow days. We would be giving those 4 snow days back. So we will have a discussion tonight with the full board on our calendar. Tentatively, as of right now, the plan is we are giving those 4 snow days back because we didn't use them. That would bring our last day to what would have been Friday, June 12th. We're going to recommend tonight our last day is June 11th, Thursday, because we're going to take back what was going to be a teacher in-service day. Would have been actually today originally, primary day in the state of Pennsylvania. That was moved then to June. Since we are remotely learning, there's no reason for us to close school on that day. So we are going to have that as a student day, and we're going to have a discussion tonight with the board on when that last day should be. But as administrative, we're recommending that we right now stay to, you know, our original, as close as we can right now to our original plans for our instructional days with our students. Chris, you go to the next slide. And we always want to take a moment to thank, we just had some donations from Radnor High School PTO, camera for the yearbook, and Right at School, you know, donation for to our food service department for snacks. And I think that is everything in the, is there any other slides there, Chris? I think that's the last one. So that concludes my remarks. Sorry for the long remarks tonight, but I wanted to give an opportunity to give an update on where we are with our program. And there's just, you know, I don't know where to begin with the thanks. You know, there's just so many people that I have just such gratitude and thanks for. It is everyone on our staff who has just been working so hard and so willing to chip in any way they can. And it is very, very much appreciated. You know, and our administrative team is working around the clock, you know, behind the scenes as well to make sure all of these things continue to happen. You know, as recent as just the other day, I sat in on a meeting where they were training our paraprofessionals, giving paraprofessionals opportunity to those one-on-one aides to have more interactions with their students in the weeks to come. So there's just exciting things to come as we continue this. But I think as Austin and Avery mentioned too, we also, you know, we want to make changes for continuous improvement, but when we find things that are working, we want to keep moving forward with those aspects of the program that are working as well. So just a gratitude for everyone, and that concludes my remarks.
Well, thank you, Ken. I think the entire board echoes your appreciation for everyone who's made such a tremendous difference. I mean, the teachers and the staff do it every day, but it really has been extraordinary. Okay, so we're going to move into our presentation, which is a continuation of last week's curriculum board committee meeting. So I think there was quite a bit of information that was shared at last week's curriculum committee meeting, but particularly regarding several items, the high school wasn't able to finish all of their presentations. And so we're going to continue that tonight. There's really no action to be taken here. It's just, I believe, just informational. Yes, Mr. Batchelor?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, just continuation. So we didn't get a chance to hear from the middle school. We didn't get a chance to finish the conversation with the high school. So some of the aspects we already discussed at the curriculum committee meeting. So this is just a continuation of that meeting.
Okay, great. So I will let you take it away.
All right.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Bechtold.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the board for this opportunity. Tonight we have the middle school principal, Dr. Weidlich, with us, and our high school principal, Mrs. Kevgis, with us. They're going to be going over the grading plans for both the middle school and the high school for the fourth quarter, as well as the middle school virtual learning plan and the process that the high school is undertaking to make a determination about commencement and other celebrations for the class of 2020. Tonight, we will begin with Dr. Weidlich, and I will turn it over to him at this time.
Can everybody hear me? Sorry, I have earbuds in because I'm afraid my 2-year-old or my 8-year-old might come screaming in. So
No, you sound great, Dr. Weidlich.
All right. So let me talk a little bit about the grading plan first. So as an administrative team at Radnor Middle School, we discussed grading for a great deal of time. And at the end of every single discussion that we had, we consistently circled back to our why. And taking several factors into consideration, a plan was developed and subsequently shared with our teachers that kept every single one of our 865 kids in mind. As a team, we believe that every one of our teachers are rock stars and they are delivering instruction to the best of their ability in these tough times. We recognize that teaching virtually, it came at us like a tornado. It was with little warning, but the impact was pretty dramatic. Yes, our teachers are stepping up to the plate each and every single day, but truth be told, virtual teaching is not the same as face-to-face classroom interactions with our kids. So, we might feel obliged to assign traditional letter grades for marking period 4, but from our lens, it's pretty paramount that we guide everyone to understand that this is a very unique and very challenging time, and students will not be at a competitive disadvantage at Radnor Middle School if they receive a grade that is not in the A through F range. As a premier middle school in the state of PA and in the United States, we're very proud to highlight the importance of learning for the sake of learning. For this marking period, we look to de-emphasize the traditional grading scale for marking period 4 and reallocate weights for each marking period on the student's final average grade. By doing this, in our eyes and in our hearts, we're keeping the best interests of our kids kind of close to the heart. So for marking period 4, and just bear with me, I'm going to kind of go through some bullet points. Our students will be routinely assessed on a variation of learning assessments. Our teachers will have the discretion to assign, to assess, and to provide formative and summative feedback on student work throughout this time frame. But here's where it's going to be a little different. When it comes time to determine a final grade for the marking period 4, our students will earn a grade of P for pass, or NI, which is needs improvement, based on the work that they completed for the marking period. At the end of the marking period, the grade of pass, or P, will be assigned based on the numerical range of a 72.6 to a 100%. Now, taking the fourth quarter and factoring that in for the final grade determination, which is a combination of marking periods 1, 2, 3, and 4, that pass has to quantify as a number. So that pass will quantify as a 90%. At the end of the marking end of the marking period grade of NI. NI is one of the marks that are in our grading scale. NI standing for needs improvement, and that will be assigned to students based on the numerical range of a 72.5 or less. For final grade determination, an NI would quantify as a 73%, which is our a hard C in our traditional grading scale. Now, a lot of questions that came up, like why aren't we doing pass fail? Instead, we're doing pass and needs improvement. I don't like fail. I don't like fail. I think that telling kids in this traditional sense that they are failing, it doesn't sit well with us. So ultimately for marking period 4, our grading stance, it does maintain all documents in relation to FAPE supports, interventions, modifications, as well as accommodations. Now, the other question that came to play is how are final grades going to be determined overall for the school year. So what we did in talking with Dr. Kent and talking with Dr. Bryan and then sharing this with some of our teacher leaders, we realized that the emphasis for final grade, it shouldn't be equally distributed. It should actually, we need to emphasize when we were actually within the brick and mortar building. So for classes that are conducted over a full school year, year-end calculations will be altered based on the school closure. The calculation will encompass marking period grades for marking periods 1 and 2, each weighted at 32.5%, and marking periods 3 and 4 would account for 25% and 10% respectively. Semester-based classes for students who had a first semester class, those grades are already done; they're already turned in. But for marking periods 3 and 4, for students who are taking semester classes right now, we adjusted the marking period weights where the third marking period would account for 60% of their overall grade, and the fourth marking period would account for 30%. You know, we understand that questions may arise, and that's absolutely okay. The most important thing that I need everyone to understand is that, you know, we took into account what a lot of other school districts surrounding us are doing, most specifically local middle schools. And we even stretched all the way up to the university level because their grading policies are changing because of what's taking place, you know, regionally, worldwide, and even worldwide. So, you know, we did not take this decision very, very lightly. We went back and forth and we kept drafting and redrafting and going back to the drawing board. And truth be told, I think that this is the best plan that we can put together for our kids.
Super. Thank you, Dr. Weidlich. Ken, do you want to bring in PT, Mrs. Kevgis, to do the grading plan for the high school? How do you want to proceed?
I'll turn it back to Dan. And how would you like to go, Dan?
We can go ahead and have Mrs. Kevgis do the grading plan, and then bring back to Dr. Weidlich to go through the virtual learning, or we could have Dr. Weidlich just continue with the virtual learning. It's really up to you.
Go with Dave while we've got Dave, and then we can get Dave out of here as soon as possible. Help him.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. So in terms of the learning schedule, this too is something that was constantly evolving at first, because, you know, we really needed to make sure that we got solid footing. But considering feedback from varied stakeholders, we developed an instructional plan that will continue to, if not better, meet the needs of our most important stakeholders in our community, which are our kids. This instructional plan has taken effect, and within this plan, we are incorporating and increasing both forms of virtual instruction, synchronous and asynchronous, into our instructional blocks and our office hours or help sessions. Now, it's important for everyone to understand from our stance, or our stances, like the various instructional techniques that are unique to teachers inside the brick and mortar building. The same applies to a virtual environment. Finding a balance between the two instructional styles is paramount. Again, making sure that kids are at the center of every decision that we make. So the goal of creating this semi-structured schedule was to provide a sense of normalcy and routine for students and families, and create more opportunities for live time with teachers and classmates. Our schedule has not lessened the instructional minutes of a core subject in a week. However, it did shorten the frequency of courses. Therefore, in lieu of students focusing on 7 classes in one learning day where they're receiving new instruction, they're focusing on 4 or 5, depending on the grade level. And students will continue or have continued to receive instruction in their elective classes each day as prescribed in their traditional schedule. Now, our office hours, they have been structured by period. Now, within our schedule, the structured office hours were developed to best meet the needs of kids. While they are to provide a venue for kids to ask questions or gain clarification on assignments or content, or ask for teachers to clarify assignments, or for teachers just to check in or provide preview or review material, they are not mandatory sessions for kids. All right. The teachers may provide feedback or review or preview material in a live or digital format, that's totally up to them. And ultimately, what office hours are, I mean, it's designed to positively impact kids. And I know in talking with some of the teachers at the middle school, during their smaller group help sessions, you have kids that might not be as vocal, starting to come out of the woodwork, so to speak. They're participating more, they're answering more questions. And so a lot of teachers are getting to see a different side of kids in a positive way. An added feature of the schedule is that our students will now have the opportunity to participate in daily enrichment and or brain breaks. Brain breaks in our lens is very, very, very important, especially with our students being the ages of some as young as 11 up to 14. All of our students will have opportunity and access to various cross-curricular enrichment activities through Schoology courses, and that's coming up in the very, very near future. This is not a mandatory, nor is it a graded course. Therefore, kids can choose to participate in these activities to any degree. So I don't know if you have a copy of what our virtual learning schedule looks like. So I don't want to. Does everyone have a copy of that? So as you can see, when I did talk about that we're not lessening the instructional minutes, instead we are lessening the frequency, what we did as a team is we decided to take up the 4 out of the 5 days and divide them into 2, with Wednesday being our collaboration and catch-up days. So on Monday and Thursday, in terms of core subjects, students are focusing on English and social studies or our humanities-based classes. And 8th graders who do have a world language every day, they would focus on that world language. And then they would matriculate through their even day elective classes. And then on Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to go more into the STEM-based classes, your math and your science, and then students would matriculate through their odd day encore and electives. And this time is flexible. Our teachers have done an amazing job coordinating times with one another within the team setting, really adhering to that middle level philosophy, something that our school is grounded by. And this newer schedule where we assigned new periods to office hours, it is relatively new. The feedback that I have been hearing has been fairly positive. There were a couple questions about office hours and are they mandatory? And I take full fault for that. I think I wasn't as specific as I should have been, but we're taking the training wheels off, and pretty soon we're going to be riding, with our hands in the air. So. This schedule has worked for the most part, and this newer one that we just employed on Monday, there were slight changes. But ultimately, we're trying to do what's best for our kids, and hopefully that it's smooth sailing here on out.
All right, thank you, Dr. Weidlich, and we will jump right into Mrs. Kevgis, and then once Mrs. Kevgis gets through speaking, then we can open it up for any questions the board may have for either Dr. Weidlich or Mrs. Kevgis. So Mrs. Kevgis is going to go through the high school grading plan and as well the plans for celebrating the class of 2020.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Hope everyone's well. I wanted to start by saying thank you to the school board, Mr. Batchelor, Mr. Bechtel, for all of their support over these past couple months. It has certainly been a ride to remember. I want to also thank our teachers at Radnor High School who continue to impress me with their dedication, with their unbelievable drive to do right by their students and, always put their best effort forth. The way that they have embraced, this, for lack of a better term, chaos, and embraced all the change that we have gone through in these past however many weeks it's been. I've lost count at this point. It's truly incredible, and I give all the credit in the world to them. So we'll start off by talking about grades. So am I able to share my screen, Mr. Bechtold?
Yes, yes, you are able to share it.
All right, thank you. So this is our document in front, and I'll talk a little bit about it for a few minutes. In a normal year, we would break down the quarters, each quarter being 20%, our midterm and our final exams being 10%. And in light of the school closure and what the third quarter really looked like, being in school for the majority of it, but then also being out of school for part of it, we really wanted to give some consideration to that, knowing that there was such a significant transition that was taking place. It was a time of great anxiety and concern for families, with COVID and all the things that were taking place during that period. And then also for the fourth marking period, our families continue to deal with, COVID-19 on a daily basis and the fear and anxiety that brings. Some of our families, are facing illness. Some of our families are facing losing their jobs or, other pressures. And so we wanted to make sure that we were cognizant of all of that and how it could be affecting our students at Radnor High School. So we really had four main goals that we wanted to address in this grading plan. One of them being to make sure that none of our students who were giving their best effort were negatively affected by this pandemic. We wanted to be respectful of the challenges that our students and teachers face with online learning. We wanted to be respectful of all the students' hard work this year, particularly after March 13th. And we wanted to be respectful of our teachers' work also after March 13th. And so we really looked at this as kind of a two-pronged, issue that we wanted to address. We wanted to look at colleges and universities to see how they would, look to this period of time in terms of transcripts for our rising seniors and even our students below that will, have this time period on their transcript. And so one of the things that we did was we asked Mr. Lemon, who's our guidance department chair, to reach out to not just local colleges and universities, but universities, of all different shapes and sizes, over the West Coast, on the East Coast, but just both large, small, private, public. We really wanted to make sure we hit all the different levels, top tier, mid tier, safety schools, to make sure that we were really, looking at every possible scenario. And the one thing that we heard continuously, no matter what school we spoke to, was that, they were willing to be flexible given the period of time and the challenges that we are facing right now. However, in that same breath, they also made it very clear that, they wanted our students to continue with their learning, and they wanted our students to make sure that they were giving their best effort, and that was something that they would take into consideration. They wanted to make sure that students weren't just kind of dropping off at the end and giving up. So, we weighed that into this program, or in this plan rather. For us, we really wanted to make sure that, again, we did not, harm the students as a result of what was going on in the world, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we held them accountable. And so we came up with a system that we feel really reflects all of that. If you take a look here at those first couple tables, this is the example that I'll use. It's a full course with a midterm. And so you'll notice I'm sorry, I think I actually pulled up an older document. This should be 15% and 20%, so excuse me. We tried to distribute the weight a little differently for the third and the fourth quarter. So with the third quarter, we weighted it at 20%, and with the fourth quarter, we weighted it at 15%. Again, the third quarter having a little bit of a heavier weight as opposed to the fourth quarter, simply because the kids were in school, or the students were in school for part of the time period, but out for a considerable portion. And again, that transition was truly unique and stressful. Thank you, Mr. Bechtold. For the fourth quarter, online learning is very different, and we're all new to this. Our teachers were raised to teach in a classroom, and our students were raised to learn in a classroom. And so, going through this transition and trying to figure out what works best is something that, we are all living right now. And again, we want to make sure that we are being respectful of that and not penalizing our students for it. So if you take a look, the first and second quarter will be 27.5%. Midterm stays the same at 10%, and then the third quarter 20, and then the fourth quarter 15. So we really feel that this represents a compromise. And this was not done in silo. This was done through discussions with our teachers, our department chairs. We had a lot of discussions with our students, especially our student government, to make sure that we were getting feedback before we move forward with this plan. If you move down on the page, you'll also see that, thank you, that there is representation for a full year course that does not have a midterm. So again, The first and second quarter are slightly weighted greater than the third and fourth quarter. And then for the last table that you see, it's for a semester course where there really is just that third and fourth quarter, but again, giving a little bit less weight to the fourth quarter. So that was pretty much that for grading. In terms of seniors, you know, we have spent an enormous amount of time thinking about our seniors. Our hearts truly break for them. It's just, you know, certainly not the senior spring that they anticipated. I don't think anybody could have seen this coming. And, you know, we want to make sure that we honor them in every way that we possibly can. And so we've been, you know, having a lot of meetings with our senior class sponsors, with our graduation coordinators, you know, with our teachers that work closely with the seniors, like Mr. Miller, who takes care of our yearbook, Mrs. Reardon, Mrs. Sotella, just to name a few. And we've really had those conversations going back and forth about what is it that we could do? You know, what are the ideas? And we've come up with so many different things. You know, but it's important that we, at this point, really say, okay, what can we plan that we know and can put in place, and what do we need to get some more input for? So with that, you know, I'll discuss what we have decided and what we're still looking to do. Two senior events that come up in the spring are Baccalaureate and Senior Recognition Night. Both take place, you know, in early June. And, you know, Baccalaureate is an evening for our senior class to come together. It's an evening of reflection where, you know, many students will share memories of their 4 years at Radnor. Sometimes, you know, they'll compose a song, or sometimes they may write a script. You know, it's really an opportunity for them to show us their artistic expression, but also to come together in a way that they may not always have the opportunity to do over the 4 years. And so it's really a celebration of them and their talents. Baccalaureate is usually held at Goodhart Hall in Bryn Mawr. Unfortunately, we, you know, will not be able to do that in June. And so we, you know, discussed what we could do to maintain this tradition. And what we decided is that we're going to do it virtually. So we are asking students to send in videos of their, you know, performance, whatever that is, to Mrs. O'Rourke and to Mrs. Crone, who is our video support specialist. And, you know, we will take all of those compilations together along with our senior class sponsors, who always give a beautiful speech to the seniors as they graduate, and, you know, make it a beautiful video production that will air the evening that Baccalaureate was meant to air, which I believe is Sunday, June 7th at 6 o'clock. And so, you know, the students will be able to see it at the same time. It will go live on YouTube, and everyone will watch it together, and it'll be a beautiful celebration, just as it was meant to be, as if we were in person. For Senior Recognition Night, we're going to do something very similar. We will be doing it virtually. It will be pre-recorded, and it will be released on Monday, June 8th at 6 o'clock, just as it was scheduled to be, you know, in the auditorium. Students will receive letters, as they have in the past, if they are receiving an award, and our teachers are actually in the process of determining those awards right now and who will be receiving them. You know, the students will not know ahead of time what award they have received. They will find out that night. So we will pre-tape everything in advance with our department chairs, who always present the awards, with our senior class sponsors, with Mr. Batchelor, all the presenters that are usually, you know, at the event itself. And we will do that in a very large Zoom conference and tape that ahead of time, and pop in our students' pictures from their yearbook as each award is announced. And so that way they find out and are surprised, just as they would have been if they were in the auditorium. So those two things have really been decided. And then there are some things that still, you know, are to be decided. And those that remain are our prom, the yearbook signing party, our senior barbecue, and graduation. And I think, you know, out of those four things, the senior barbecue and the yearbook signing party are probably things that, you know, we will suggest and look to try and put off until the end of the summer, simply because it's something that we could do right before the kids leave for college, hopefully if they leave for college, you know, and do that almost as a going away party for them. But prom and graduation, you know, we have lots of different ideas. We've talked to lots of different schools. I was talking to the principal at Conestoga today, and she was sharing with me what they're doing. There's all different ideas. We've heard of, you know, things from having a drive-through graduation to having a socially distanced graduation, to having virtual proms, to having an actual prom and delaying the dates. So there's, you know, an enormous amount of ideas out there. But again, I really feel that this is something that we need the kids, the students rather, to weigh in on, and our parents to weigh in on. And so I sent an email to our senior parents on Sunday night asking for volunteers, both student and parent, to take part in a committee that will run over the course of the next 2 weeks, where we can really throw ideas out and look at the, you know, the benefits of them and the drawbacks and the realities of what we may face in terms of social distancing, and really, you know, determine what we think is best and what the kids really want to see happen. Because at the end of the day, this is about celebrating them, not celebrating us. And it's important that they really let us know what they would like to see. And so, you know, we'll run that committee. We'll also have our senior class sponsors on there, as well as our graduation coordinators, myself. And we will, you know, come up with a plan, a recommendation that we will give to Mr. Batchelor and Mr. Bechtold, and then, you know, we will move from there and make a decision. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kevgis. I know that we are going to open this up for a few questions, Mr. Batchelor, but I think we should probably start with members of the curriculum committee, since this would have started with them last week if the meeting had had time to complete everything. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I defer to the curriculum committee. Sarah or Andrew, Lydia, Amy, do you have questions about what Dr. Weidlich and Mrs. Kevgis were able to present?
So this is Lydia. I don't have any questions because Andrew and I participated in the planning meeting for this, but I just want to reiterate what I felt after our planning meeting for the curriculum committee. I just was struck by how much thought and care had gone into doing the right thing for our students by the administration. And I just wanted to say that at this point as well. Like, it was abundantly clear to me how hard people had worked to try to really do what's right for our kids at all levels. So I don't have any further questions. I just wanted to say that publicly in the meeting.
Great, thank you, Amy. Andrew or Sarah?
Sure, just a quick echoing of Lydia's comments. I think we were all very impressed and very encouraged by all the work and the heart that went into the information that was shared tonight. And yeah, our hearts go out to the seniors for sure. But it's really encouraging to see that there's just a lot of progress being made and a lot of excellent work being done by our administrators. So hats off to them. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Sarah or Amy? You good? Amy, do you have any questions?
Sarah just looked like she had something.
Oh, I thought you were doing no, you're good.
Oh, no, I was letting Amy go first if she wants.
Go ahead, Amy. Go. Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
I defer to Sarah.
So no, I wanted to also thank the administrators. It's very clear there's a lot of work going on. I'm sure you've gotten a lot of feedback as Mr. Batchelor mentioned about change and everything kind of resolving, but I really appreciate that you're doing all that with the best interest of the kids and the teachers in mind, that education, you know, continues at the best possible level for everyone involved. I just had one question about the middle school, the new middle school schedule. I think some parents just want to understand the new schedule. If you look at it, it almost looks like kids might really have a full day of school. And I think when I'm going to assume my house isn't that different from everyone else's, that kids aren't getting up necessarily as early as they would be for school, and they're not spending the whole day actually working on this. Is this just, your suggestion for when things will be and based around when the office hours are that the teachers are offering?
Yeah, you're correct. So with the office hours, one of the last things that we wanted kids to do was to have to make that decision of, all right, well, hypothetically, my science teacher's offering office hours at 8 o'clock, but then so is my Spanish teacher. Which one am I going to go to? So we didn't want to put kids in the middle of a decision. You know, with that being said, we also wanted to make sure that we kept in mind teacher autonomy and flexibility and things like that. So the schedule that you have in front of you, it's not very different from what the kids were living 2 weeks ago. And that schedule that we implemented. The only caveat was this addition of the office hours. Now, office hours are not mandatory. We just wanted to make sure that, like I said, we did provide a time for kids. And unfortunately, you know, we had to figure out, do we want to start at 8 o'clock or do we want to continue it past 2:55 going into the 3s, almost 4s? And to be honest with you, I don't think that there was I don't know. We could have gone either way. But so I'm sorry. So the kids do not have to go to the office hours unless a teacher requests that they do for additional support, or if the kids want to go in, for previewing, reviewing, for clarification on assignments or things like that. So technically, instruction would begin at 8:50 if kids decided not to go to the office hours, and it would end around 2:05 again if they decided not to go to the back end office hours.
Okay. And then I just wanted to say it was very clear to me that both you and Mrs. Kevgis focused a lot on what was a fair way to grade students, recognizing that circumstances in every household are very different. Mm-hmm. And I think I heard a little bit of a reference to it from our student representatives earlier. And so maybe this is just a plea to the students who might actually be watching or hear about this meeting. You know, your learning is ultimately your responsibility. You know, the fact that you aren't going to be graded harshly on this semester doesn't mean that there's not every opportunity to learn. And to the extent it's available, you know, I hope the students are taking advantage of that. And if they feel it's not available, you know, it's not just on parents. If students think there's more someone could be doing to help them, they should certainly feel free to reach out as well. Mm-hmm. I think that the teachers really are making an incredible effort. I know the administrators are trying to facilitate all of that. So I think, you know, everyone's in this together, and we urged patience at the curriculum committee meeting, and I'm echoing that at my house. I hope if we're all doing that, that will also facilitate the learning process. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Mrs. Don, I'll just jump in there for a second and kind of piggyback on what you said about, you know, still, you know, making sure that you're paying attention to the learning and really, you know, staying with it. You know, it's certainly, I'm concerned with categorizing, you know, and I've heard the kids say this as, you know, it's easy for the fourth quarter. You know, the percentage that we picked was very particular so that, you know, students would not, if students were trying their best and they were really struggling for one reason or another, because I think we can all, you know, safely say that, you know, our students, some of them are really struggling with anxiety right now and just dealing with all the stress of this situation. And so, you know, if they're really trying and they're just struggling, we didn't want to penalize them again for that. And so, you know, the fourth quarter, if it doesn't help their overall year grade, it's not going to count, right? But if it does, if they're really putting that effort forth and they're able to overcome those challenges, 15% is enough that it can help your grade. It's not, you know, not something to, you know, I want to get that message out to the kids. It's not something to just ignore, certainly. And again, you know, if they're mailing it in, they're really not putting that effort forth, it's going to affect their grade because they're going to end up failing for that quarter. And, you know, we don't want that, that's for sure. So I think it really was a fair balance of trying to make sure that the kids had a parachute, but at the same time, still kind of making sure that they were being responsible at the same time. Yep. Thank you.
Amy?
I think pretty much everybody has said the things that I'm thinking as we've gone through this presentation. I'll just add to it two things. One, I guess I imagine there's some flexibility if there are some circumstances where students find that their transition in third quarter or fourth quarter vary based on what your assumptions are, that if they're having a particular challenge, they could reach out to you or the principal, and given this uncharted territory, there's probably opportunity to figure out how to maximize this last part of the year, so that even though there's a formula, there's a way to not be penalized based on the formula if there's some extenuating circumstances. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And second, I think Mr. Batchelor and Dr. Weidlich mentioned it, that in addition to creating this for the here and now, I really appreciate the fact that you're doing this with an eye to the future, because who knows what September is going to look like. We could not be in school at all. We could be going on, there are countries that are only opening up for certain divisions and not even bringing in those grades all together at the same time. And this type of learning could play, for as big of a role as it's playing now, could be playing even a bigger and longer term role going forward. And I always assume that you guys have that foresight, but I just wanted to specifically mention appreciation for the fact that you're taking the long view on all of this, because who knows what it'll look like. And we could come out of this even stronger and more innovative and flexible and dynamic and educational community than we even were before. So again, kudos to all who are making this happen, administrators, teachers, support staff, everybody. And it's we've got to keep looking for those silver linings in the midst of something that's been in many ways so terrible. So thank you again for sharing all of that with us.
So Nancy or Liz, do you have a question, Nancy? Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I think for some of these points have already been raised. I think the grading is fair, absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that there's been a lot of benchmarking with other high schools as well as even for colleges. A couple of comments / questions that I have. For the high school, I know that it was raised by the students that with if it's a passing grade and it doesn't impact or it negatively impacts their overall grade, that it won't count. The concern that some of the students would more or less do the bare minimum. I think Ms. Dunn kind of referenced the fact that it is the student's responsibility, but I would hope that also it would be seen by the teacher to kind of alert the student that they need to really be pulling their weight a little bit more. I can speak from experience, so I can. And then the only other thing with the middle school, and this is more, again, the question on the pass-fail, for those high achieving students that, let's say, are above a 90, if they get a pass and get a 90, just providing those families with reassurance that it won't negatively impact that student, that even though it's going to be counted for, I think it was 10%, was it 10%? Yeah, 10% in the fourth quarter, it's still going to impact their grade if it's a 90 versus, let's say, a 95. So I just know that there may be those high achieving students and parents who may be concerned about that, just raising that as a comment. And then the last thing, and I'm just getting all my comments out at once. The last thing, seniors, I think our heart goes out to all of them. These are tremendous milestones, and whatever we can do to make it the best experience for them, I think that we're all in support of that. The only question I would say also is I'm sure there are discussions about moving up ceremonies, because we also have our middle school students as well as our elementary school fifth graders who are also missing these milestones. And I'm sure there are discussions about it, but maybe when we have an opportunity to start sending out those communications to the parents, that would be helpful too.
Ms. Monahan, if you don't mind, when we started to toy with the percentages, we did take all of that into consideration with our students who are like at our top of our grading scale. So for students who hypothetically were earning 97s and 98s and things of that nature, what would a 90 do to that? And it would have very little negative influence, if at all. In the same breath, for kids who may have been struggling, to kind of go back to what PT was suggesting, kids who are struggling but we're putting forth 100% effort, this would do nothing but positively influence the grade. So we did take into account. We ran some of those really cool Excel formulas to make sure that that my math wasn't getting messed up. Dr. Kent did the same thing, Dr. Bryan as well. So we did take all of that into consideration.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Let's see, Jeff or Liz, Bradley, do you have jump in with any questions?
No, I'll just comment, quick appreciation, in addition to what everyone else has said, and in your ability to adapt. I think that's critical, and kudos to the communication. I see it more from the middle school level on a personal basis. Dr. Weilich can appreciate it, but it's the ability to adapt and accept feedback, which I think sends a message in of itself. So Nancy took away my one question as it related to moving up ceremonies, so I appreciate Ms. Monahan bringing that up, and I look forward to seeing what seniors come first, absolutely, but 8th and 5th graders, I know that's a special time for them too, and their families. So thank you.
Sure. Bradley?
No questions, just thank you for your hard work, and thank you for taking both empathy and equity into account when you thought about how the grades would change for this term. Everybody's facing different circumstances, and taking that into account is very important. Appreciate it.
Liz, do you have any questions?
No questions, just echoing what all my fellow board members have said. Just a heart full of gratitude for all the hard work, and really kudos for the theme of continuous improvement. I've certainly seen that in my home, and really appreciate that you have had an open dialogue with the parents, and I think really have been responsive. And like Ms. Goldman said, I really appreciative that we have gotten to where we are this week, so that we, God forbid, we end up in a position in the fall that we have, some experience to draw on, and we've experimented on different approaches so that we can put our best foot forward next fall if need be, which I really hope we're not there.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I do have one question. So if I read the paper correctly, I think it's at the high school, Mrs. Kavgis, if it's a semester course, the 3rd quarter will count 100% and the 4th quarter will count 0. Did I read that correctly?
I think you're looking at one scenario versus the other. So 100% if semester course and they don't do well in the 4th quarter. Then
Got it.
The 3rd would be
Okay.
100%. Yep.
All right, great. So again, it's with an eye toward minimizing any negative impacts of this new way of learning.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, I won't belabor it other to say, a huge thank you. I know that there's had to be a real flexibility of thought in your approach to education, and I really appreciate you're in a marathon. I mean, that's kind of what this is right now, and finding a pace that works for you, for the teachers, for the families. Thinking about how you're doing the grading has really been, I'm very thoughtful of I'm appreciative of the thought that's gone into it. There's a course at the middle school, Soundings, that doesn't have grades. And one of my children participated in that course. And I'm going to say he learned an awful lot that year without a grade. And I can't think of who said it at the beginning. Maybe it was Sarah, or maybe it was Lydia. This is a real opportunity that it doesn't have to be about the grades right now. And students can take responsibility for their own learning, or a bigger hand in their own learning. And there's a lot to learn from that experience of that level of ownership. So I think it was Sarah who said, encouraging and supporting the kids to reach out and advocate for themselves. And there's a teacher at the high school who doesn't generally give out his grades right away. He writes the comment. He wants the kids to focus on the feedback and not so much the grade. So this is an interesting, I view this as a real challenge, you know, for which you are all rising, but it's a real opportunity for our kids, our families, our teachers, you know, everyone to think about what's really important in education and in real learning. A little less focus on the grades isn't necessarily a bad thing. So thank you all for that. And I appreciate you clarifying that for me, Mrs. Kevgis, because that puzzled me, but so I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions on that, Mr. Bechtold, thank you so much for bringing this to us tonight. And thank you all for being a part of it. I don't know, is Mr. Dukevich a part of this tonight? I can't see him on my, oh, there he is, he's just muted. Alrighty, great. Well, then with all that, then we're gonna move away from the presentation and enter into the public comment portion of our evening.
Before we do that, Susan,
Sure.
Or is the calendar later in the agenda? I apologize.
Calendar's later in the agenda.
Calendar's later, so we're fine. Yep, so Dan,
Yep.
we're good? We covered everything?
Yes, we're good. We covered everything that needed to be covered for this section.
Great. Alrighty, so at the public comment portion of our evening, citizens are encouraged to address our board during the public comment portion. Obviously, tonight you will be entertaining that public comment. If citizens have written into board comments at rtsd.org, I really want to thank and acknowledge the administration for making our board comments at RTSD email address prominent on the front page of our website. Thank you for being responsive. We really want to make sure the public is aware that they can participate and that the way to do that right now is by our email address. So the administration will review the questions and the corresponding answers will be posted on the district's board doc website by the start of the first committee meeting of the following month. Mr. Petiti, do we have any public comment tonight?
Yes, we have one comment. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. It is from Tim, Chris, and Lucy Henkel. We would like to congratulate the steering committee and the facilities committee for great progress in advancing the RHS accessibility and wellness project schematic design for land use approvals. We are really happy with the direction of the plans. They reflect significant collaboration, broad input, and well-considered priorities. Without commenting on every aspect of the plans, we would like to call the board's attention to some specific elements of the design that we see as meaningful, impactful, and perhaps still unappreciated. First, the design dramatically increases ease of movement and access around the school and fields and among the parking lots and entrances. Second, the design naturally adds new and different outdoor spaces that students and visitors will experience in exciting ways. There are gathering spaces on each side of campus which facilitate student pickup, assembly, before and after events, etc. Notably, even though the second floor of the field house is designed as a viewing platform and a covered place of refuge and waiting, it could very naturally be used as an outdoor classroom, adding utility to the academic day. Third, the design process has included emphasis on ease of maintenance and durability. This is an important consideration. One simple way this is accomplished is that there are not a lot of new stairs, so no need to shovel ramps and stairs. Another pertains to trees. It is helpful to recognize that the large mature trees are another form of deferred maintenance. The trees on Raider Road and near the pool entrance should not have been allowed to mature in those locations. They damage walks, drop limbs, threaten rooftop drainage, obscure field lighting and security cameras. Care should be given in choosing locations and species of replacement trees. Periodic maintenance should be budgeted to make sure new trees aren't threatened by similar neglect. Prune often. Finally, while not seen on the plans or part of the current design, we can confirm that a lot of future considerations have influenced decisions that have been made. The design takes great care to not place limitations on later improvements should they become necessary to future generations. As you all know, our focus as a family and as participants in the steering committee has been on accessibility. The architect has done a great job of understanding the obstacles that exist right now. The solutions are simple. The new routes and access points are common to those who can walk and those who need wheelchairs or other forms of assistance. Simply put, everyone goes the same way on routes that aren't too steep or that have stairs making them inaccessible to band and snack bar equipment, to small maintenance cars and trainer vehicles, strollers, and wheelchairs, to canes, crutches, and walkers. As pleased as we are with the design progress, we still feel the need to restate how meaningful and important these changes are and to ask the board to maintain its conviction, even as we deal with COVID-19 impacts. We encourage you to move quickly to move these improvements forward. We are confident in the direction they are headed. We hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Mr. Petiti. Are there any other public comment?
That is all.
Okay, great. So now we're going to move into our report from board committees. And starting first, we have our curriculum committee report. Ms. Solomon?
Thank you. The curriculum committee met virtually on April 21st. We had a jam-packed agenda. We received a lengthy and informative update on the continuity of education plan for our district. And despite having our usual hour-and-a-half committee meeting allotted, we were unable to get through most of our agenda. So on tonight's agenda, which we just heard, was the continuation of the curriculum committee meeting, which included a discussion of the grading and finals for the high school, the plan for the middle school, and a discussion about graduation. And later on in the agenda, which was also on the curriculum committee agenda, was an update on the calendar, the instruction calendar for this year, the 2019-2020 calendar. So I think the fact that the curriculum committee was unable to get through what we had to discuss, even though moving very rapidly through everything, is indicative of how much work is going on within the district to try to move education forward for our students. And I think that it really shows by just how much, how many changes there are and how people have worked really hard to address the needs to listen to people, which my board colleagues have all expressed tonight. I do want to reiterate one thing that came from the committee members during the meeting, which was an expression on our part that of the committee that we would like everyone to focus really on supporting the support and well-being, especially of our teachers who are really struggling, some of them in the current situation. And I think many of us said that, and I want to just reiterate that for the whole board, that that was a focus that many of us were very interested, you know, in having that be part of what everyone's thinking, is that we want people's well-being and support for our teachers to be, you know, kind of in the forefront of our planning. So I think that wraps it up. We will have another committee meeting in May. We're working hard.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to move into our facilities committee report. Sarah?
I'm not going to give a lengthy report because you all attended the facilities committee. I appreciate you joining our committee of the whole. For the public, we had a lengthy meeting with our architects to review the schematic design that they're proposing that we move forward to tonight for discussion and approval. And we also proposed that the board approve a contract with Fidavia, who is a construction manager that we're currently using at the transportation center for a project there. And the idea is that they would also represent us through the process of the project at the high school. We also had a report on the trail and the progress with the township's proposed easement for a trail that would extend along the Lancaster Avenue portion of our high school property and up the King of Prussia side of our property as well. It was very informative. It's helpful to understand what's being proposed, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the future.
Great, thank you so much. Alrighty, moving into the Finance Committee report. The Finance Committee met April 21st virtually, and at that meeting we accepted our financial reports and approved donations from, among other things, Right at School for $300, which you see on tonight's agenda. There were a variety of disposals that are also on tonight's agenda. And in addition, on tonight's agenda, you see our approval of the DCIU general budget and the tech school budgets, as well as a service agreement with the DCIU for them to provide our special ed services, or a variety of special ed services. Also on tonight's agenda, you see the approval for paperwork with the PlanCon, which has PDE acknowledged that we did the refinancing in 2019 of some 2012, 2013, and 2015 bonds. This saved us in excess of $1.3 million, this refinancing, which is very good news, and needed funds at this time, so that was great. Also tonight, we have the approval of the DCIU Board of Directors from 5 school districts for a 3-year term. And then we also looked at an update of the 2020-2021 budget. We looked at a variety of scenarios. I think what we agreed and where we led the administration is that they have some more fine tuning to do. We need some more information from the state as to what the funding might be, and the federal government. There's certainly some uncertainty on that right now, but the administration is working hard, and we will get some updates on personnel and other information as needed. I think we all agreed as a board, as a committee, that it is likely we will approve our budget in the month of June, not at our May board meeting, which is what we typically try to do. So I think everyone, if you can build it into your schedules and find some free time, I think we'll probably be looking to schedule a meeting in mid-June to do a final approval of the budget, but we will hopefully be getting an update in the month of May and be able to give some more board direction there. Our next Finance Committee meeting will be Tuesday, May 12th, and that again will be virtual. Amy, do you have a Policy Committee report?
Policy did not meet in April. 2 weeks from tonight at 5 o'clock, we will be reconvening as a Policy Committee.
Great. And Andrew, the Government Relations and Communications Committee, do you have a report?
I have a very lengthy report. No, just kidding. We didn't meet this past month. But tonight we have a resolution for approval coming up opposing House Bill 1800, which is a tuition voucher program. So that will be coming up later.
Great.
And we'll be having a meeting on May 12th, Tuesday, May 12th at 7.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move into our priority discussion action item, which is approval of the schematic design for land use development for the Radnor High School ADA Accessibility and Wellness Project. I know that I'm pretty sure we have with us Steve Behrens tonight from Breslin. Yes, Mr. Batchelor?
Yes, so we have Steve is with us, as well as some others. Julian is with us from his firm, and also we have Hugh Cadzo is with us as well, and Bill Dolan, our Director of Operations, is with us. And just to put a little context with it, and I'll turn it over to Bill and Steve, but as Sarah already mentioned, we did a Facilities Committee of the Whole last week. So if there's anyone who is just tuning in now, we had a very lengthy committee that was focused just on this topic, and all board members were present for that. We're bringing it back again now for board action. So we've asked Steve and Bill, Steve, to provide just more of an overview of what we discussed last week, and then we would go into any kind of board questions before we move forward with the resolution. So I'll turn it over to Bill and Steve.
Thank
you, Ken. I'm not going to belabor this too much, because what Steve has to show us is a sort of an update of what we saw last Tuesday, a little bit fuller developed video and some schematics that are really, really sharp looking. So renderings, I should say. So I'm going to let Steve do that. I just want to reiterate what I had said last week, that when we're looking at these, I would like us just to remember that they are in the schematic phase. And so there's a lot of detail in them, but a lot of those details are not fully fleshed out. And that's in the next phase in design development. So try to look at the big picture, I guess is what I'm saying. And then Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Ken. Thank you for the opportunity to be here again tonight to discuss the schematic design. I'll start by saying I'm joined by Julian Pelikanakis, who's the project architect from our firm, as well as Hugh Cadso, who's representing ELA, the civil engineer and athletic designer on the project. At this point, among our consultants, the civil engineering and athletic design is moving forward at the commensurate with our architectural design. So I appreciate that introduction, Ken, and I'll echo to say that what you'll see is at the schematic level. So we're not showing every single detail and appurtenance at this point, but the purpose of schematic design is to speak mostly towards the development of the program, the confirmation of the program, to set the stage and prepare for the land development submissions that are on the critical path and control a lot of the schedule. And so it's important to get those moving rapidly and to receive the permits and so forth in time. So with that being said, Chris, if I can share my screen, I will share the animation, which has advanced a little bit from last week. So we're starting at the entrance to Prevost Field, panning out and around over top of the tennis courts, and we can see the new ramps and accessible connection to both the upper and lower courts. Coming around in the middle of the frame is the fitness addition, the two-story addition. Coming in over Prevost Field, we're seeing a new track and turf surface. The bank of new bleachers for the home side, up against the natatorium beyond. And coming in on the left are the ramps that form the main circulation down to the field level. The field house, as we're passing by, that faces both Prevost and Enke fields. There's new bleachers for Enke Field up against Raider Way. Panning out for an overall shot here, looking back past the field house to the high school. Then come along on Radnor Chester Road as if we're approaching to enter along Raider Way. It's a good vantage point to see the prominent position the field house will have and be memorable as one enters the campus. And then coming out over the ramps and showing how You have a very prominent outlook to look over top of the field. Forms not only a circulation path, but also an area of pause and opportunity to congregate informally and look over the field. And then passing the top of the home bleachers to the new ADA parking area and the entrance to the natatorium. A new covered entrance, provide some protection, as well as make something of that new lobby area. These are renderings, go through a series here in slideshow form from some key vantage points. This is looking from the second level of the field house over Prevo. And then looking the other way towards Enki, you can see how that's an exciting gathering area with lots of possibilities and opportunities. Looking up from the field to the new glassy fitness area in the second level. Okay, that's the animation. And then I will come back to PowerPoint presentation. So we have those rendering available. So I'll open it up to questions at this point. And we have, I can reference any of those slides or the renderings as needed, or we can go back to the animation.
Steve, I just want to make an observation that's very refreshing and hopeful to see students gathered on the fields and the campus again, even if it's just in your drawings. So that's kind of nice.
Right.
Just as we're chasing them off fields right now, which is, breaks your heart, but it's cheerful to see that.
And I was going to say, it's so nice to see a sunny day in Radnor and they're wearing shorts and it's warm. Like, there's not too much of that right now. So that's great. I recognizing that we did have our full committee of the whole last week, I swear you added the trees back in, or maybe they more of the actual trees that exist on the property are in this image. So thank you. I'm like, yeah, I thought there was a tree there, and I thought there was a tree there.
Right.
Thank
you. They grew quickly in the last week. Right?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. All the rain. Do we have additional questions from the board about the project? About the project and the presentation itself. And feel free to raise your hand if anyone has a question.
Would it be easier to take the screen share off for questions, or?
The way my screen is, I actually am able to have both, but I think the presentation itself, I think the feedback you got last week, the plan is beautiful. I do think we asked a few questions last week. There may be some more specific questions about timing and timeline. Ken, do you want to kind of guide us through?
Sure.
Or Steve, help guide us through some of the other paperwork. I appreciate this update. I think this is very informative for us to have, Steve, at the board meeting level. The public tends to be more tuned into our monthly board meetings. So please don't take our lack of questions as this not being really valuable for us to have incorporated into our regular monthly board business meeting. I'm very hopeful that, many members of the public will come and view the video, tune into our meeting and see this, and it will be very informative for them. So I appreciate the effort, and it's it's really very helpful to have the project brought to life in such a vivid fashion. So thank you.
Thank you.
And, you know, and for anyone who's maybe just tuning in for the first time about this project, you know, this has been a project that has been, you know, been being developed and for a couple of years now. The realization that we had many challenges when it came to the accessibility of our campus. And we put together a steering committee that was very thoughtful in working with both first a feasibility study, and then after an extensive feasibility study, engaging with an architect. You know, we looked at a lot of different designs, a lot of different ways we could do this. I want to just thank the steering committee and the school board over the last really year to 2 years, you know, for keeping the scope of this focused on accessibility and wellness, keeping the scope of this focused on not only the accessibility, but what are the things that we have to do as well. So besides having to increase accessibility, we know we needed to replace the turf. That's coming. We've been planning on it already. We know we need to replace the surface of the track. That's coming whether we do this project or not. We know we didn't have accessibility, you know, in our pool area when it came to the need for an elevator in there. We know that there are upgrades that we needed to do within our building. So all of those pieces and that recognition of the accessibility and then the upgrades of things we had to do have been incorporated with this. You know, one question I have, Steve, that maybe Steve or Bill, you could answer for me, and just, you know, question I've been receiving from some board members, you know, as from between now and, you know, between last week and tonight is, you know, we're in unknown waters right now, you know, uncharted waters. You know, we had a finance meeting last month where we talked about, you know, back in January, we were looking at our budget in one regard, and we had a finance meeting that was looking at our budget next year in a very different light now, based on everything that's going on within our own community, within our country, you know, and we need to be responsive to that and continue to be good stewards of our tax dollars. Recognizing also we've been moving forward with this, recognizing that we know the things that we feel we have to do. But let's say we don't know what September brings. We don't know what January brings. If we need to change, what are some of the milestones quickly in this? And if we should decide to, you know, we had a discussion last week about, you know, there could be a lot of advantages moving forward right now with the economy and how things are going. We might actually, by having a shovel-ready project, could be in a very advantageous point. At the same time, if there's some other changes and we need to adjust and maybe pull back from this in some manner, what does that look like and what are the milestones? Would you be able to share some of that, Steve, with us?
Yes, I can actually bring those schedules up through the share here.
You know, it can actually, it's dawning on me, just because this is ultimately something we're going to take a vote on tonight. Why don't we start this part of the conversation off? I'd like to entertain a motion and a second, so that if Steve makes a part of his presentation, if it ends up developing into some board discussion or questions, you know, we've opened this with an entertaining of a motion and a second. So do I have a motion? You know, we have a recommendation here. So I have Sarah Dunn making a motion to move forward on the recommendation of the administration to approve this schematic design. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second from Nancy Monahan. So now, Steve, if you go ahead, if we end up in questions and discussion where we've opened it in that regard, thanks.
Sure, absolutely. So what we're seeing here is the overall project schedule, which will be familiar to you in general from even the end of the study and our meetings prior. This lays out in a very succinct manner the entire project schedule, and what you see there in bold are two key milestones that represent board votes. We have the approval of schematic design tonight. The next traditional board vote would be on the approval of design development, which we are looking at this point to prepare for late July. And then that, if the board votes to move forward, would move us into the construction document phase. And moves through the winter and the early spring and through bidding. And then in April, we're looking at the board vote to accept bids and enter into contracts. So to put that in perspective, that's 3 major milestones before you're to the point of committing millions of dollars for the construction of this project. I think it's safe to say that with these 2 milestones, we're going to know a lot more about the economy, about the procurement of construction, about the approval process, and the feasibility study that's running concurrently. We'll also know more about that. And so I think those things all work together to assist with putting in a very strong position to make those important decisions.
Steve, what did it mean to say submit plans to CM? I think it was in.
Sure. That's the construction manager. That's a little abbreviation there to.
CM stood for. Thank you.
So along with the conclusion of design development, the construction manager is on board at that point and would have prepared a design development level detailed estimate. So along with the approvals of different authorities having jurisdiction over the project, we're also working internally to fine tune the design and then ultimately confirm our budget assumptions with the input from the construction manager.
Thank you.
And Steve, if in, let's say, December, or let's say I'm gonna pick a couple of times before we go out to bid. So let's say somewhere in the December timeframe or somewhere in the next March. So before we've actually gone out to bid, if we should decide to slow things down for a year, or take a little bit of a pause based on some unknown that we don't know about right now. Do the designs and the work that we're doing now, can you take a pause from that and use those design and pick up several months later or a year later with some of that work, or do you have to go back to the drawing board?
I'll say that it's best to pick milestone points in time to address that. Yes, at any point in time, there are means to put the project in pause, but the nature of the calculations, the nature of the design, the nature of the approval process you see on the schedule here, the land development process, the construction document phase. That August to February timeline is when there's the most people working on the project in terms of consultants, the architect, and all of our engineering consultants. So yes, you can certainly pick other points in time to stop, but the best and most efficient time to do it is really at these milestones. And the reason being, then, if there is a pause and you're picking it back up, it's just easier to pull the ship alongside the dock, so to speak, and bring things to a logical conclusion. If that answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. Does anyone have questions about the timing of this design phase that Steve has, the timeline that Steve has put out there for us? Lydia, did I see you raise your hand?
No, I don't have questions about the time frame, but I have comments about the process. So
Okay,
I'll wait for that part.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Do we have any other questions from anyone? Liz, you look like maybe you have a question. You're on mute still.
So I don't know if it's I mean, I'll first make a comment, which I think I've already shared. I mean, I think the schematic designs look amazing. I think it was incredibly exciting to see all the hard work brought to life in the design. And for me personally, that trip down Raider Road to see those ramps and the increased accessibility of our campus and to see those gathering places was particularly thrilling. And probably even more so given our current situation. So I just applaud the work that's gone into this and the clear set of defined goals that I think Steve really brought to life and his team really brought to life. So I think my questions, I've shared this with Ken and the board, is more on timing and you're speaking to a little bit with the milestones, but given the current unknowns of our, the situation we find ourselves in, what are the costs associated with each time we approve a new step? And I'd like to hear more from the administration on, and maybe Michelle on that in terms of, so we approve the schematic designs today, and then what gets us to that the phase, looking at the contract, what's involved, what are we obligated to, what are we spending in the next few months to get us to that next critical milestone of the end of July when we have those design plans, and how much flexibility in that process do we have should, for any reason, any one element of the scope long-term change. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does, Liz. And I think that might be something Steve and Bill, I'll turn it to Steve first to maybe jump in. I mean, if we pull the boat to let's go with that analogy, and we pull the boat to the dock at one of those milestones, what are the financial impacts?
Sure. Contractually, our fee is broken down on a percentage basis through the phases of design. At the conclusion of design development in July, it would equate to about 35% of our fee. So that again is a point at which there's a decision for the board to make to move forward. And at that point, theoretically, you could say, okay, we brought if things go south, so to speak, and we needed to take a pause or something like that, that would be a logical time to do it. What I would say about that, though, is that we would want to continue at that point with the land development process. So the architectural, the engineering of the building design could take a pause, but because of the nature, the duration, and the importance of that land development process, we don't want to pause that. So that would continue through to really February in terms of moving forward uninterrupted. And I can turn it over to Hugh to add to this, but the key thing to remember there is there's a 5-year window once you have that approval in hand, so that it's really wise to, and there's really no disincentive to move forward on that. In fact, you open yourself up to greater risk if you don't, with changing regulations and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Steve, thank you for mentioning. It's so the 5-year vesting is still of a plan approval is still a valid thing.
It is. It's 5 years to substantial completion. So that means the project is essentially done. You're not just starting at that point.
So you'd recommend that we would go to final plan approval, not preliminary approval?
Yes, fine.
Okay, all right.
Susan, before you move off this point, I was hoping, Steve, that you could give us a little bit more kind of detail. And I don't mean to get crass in terms of dollars, but I think everybody's thinking dollars and cents in these economic times. So your fee is 7.5% of the cost of work of the project, which is a specifically defined term in the contract. And it's actually calculated. It's not a number that right now is necessarily set. And then what we owe you is a set of progress payments. So we pay percentages of that number to be determined as we go. And so there are kind of estimates that we're using in the meantime till the cost of work is actually set. Can you give us a ballpark figure what 35% of that, of your total fee will end up being, so people have a sense of what we're talking about and whether this is just the magnitude of the money we're talking about? Sure.
Yeah, I did some back of the envelope numbers there, anticipating you might ask. So 35% of the architect and the MEP and the structural engineers constitutes about $436,000. That's 35% of all of that fee.
Of the 7.5%.
That's right.
And Steve, just because I want to make sure we're giving credit where credit is due, and so people appreciate it's not just the Steve Barons they see on the screen or Steve and Hugh. There's a team of people whom we're compensating with that money. It's a number of firms that are engaged. You're just the one we pay, and then you're responsible for compensating everyone else.
Yeah, it would be essentially four firms: ourselves, our MEP engineer, the structural engineer, the aquatic consultant for the pool, and then also, yes, ELA. And talk to Hugh, and to get an estimate from him as well. It's important to understand that the vast majority of his work, far more than the 35% we're expending, is encapsulated into doing the design, and because the majority of the design needs to be done to make those submissions. So that's roughly 280,000 as well. So if you back out the little prorated feasibility study credit that we've been offering, it's about 709,000 total. That portion of the fee for the AE design through the end of design development, plus all the civil engineering fees associated with achieving land development approval.
So Steve, if I could just put it in a term, because if people have up this paperwork, that 709 you just referenced gets us to which date on your benchmark, on your
well, for everyone with the exception of the civil engineer, it gets us through the end of July. So it gets you to 35% completion of the project, if you will, the design development. So that's the point at which we have met with all the various constituencies, done the detailed design of all the various spaces. We hope at that point to have feedback on the enrollment projections, so we can test the spaces that we're including and the capacity of the building, and then the buy-in and the specific design of each distinct space within the building is complete.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then that's July, but then February is the completion of the land development approval. So that's going to be going on past July.
So is it possible, Steve, to pull up that, as you're referencing the timeline, would you be able to, unless anybody objects, do a screen share so we can see these different benchmarks?
Sure. Let me bring that up again. So that's here. I'll highlight those two board decision points again. And right between, essentially between those two red boxes, you'll see receive land development approval. If you can see my cursor, it's right here. So that bounds the construction document phase. That's where we're doing all the detailed design, taking the approved design and developing it into a bidding and construction package. That's what we would potentially hit pause on, but that we would recommend that you continue with the land development approval process regardless.
So Steve, basically, if we hit pause in the summer on, let's say, your work, for lack of a better way to put it, Hugh would continue on. You've mentioned both of those numbers already. You would maybe incur some fees just engaging Hugh through that process, but you would you wouldn't go into all the details of the construction documents, and that's where the savings would be. But we would still be able to go forward and get land development taken care of. Okay.
Yes.
And maybe it's also worth noting that as of to now, we talked about getting to 35% in the summer, but we're at about 10 or 15 of that to date. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yep,
So,
schematic design has its percentage completion as well.
So, and then there's the construction document phase. So you were pointing out there's a position where we could pause at the end of July, and you would put the construction document preparation on hold as a potential. I'm not moving for that or motioning for that. I'm just talking about options here. That's another 40% of the fee. So if we do that, we're looking at another essentially $500,000 in fees for you. But the recommendation is that we continue through with the land development. So you'd be moving those two pieces in tandem.
That's correct, right.
Okay.
So what you're describing then is the completion of construction documents is the point at which you're ready to release to bid.
Okay.
So the design work is complete.
Yeah.
All the documentation is complete. You've reached the 75% mark then. And at that point, then it doesn't make sense, perhaps, to not get the bidding, right? Find out what those numbers are, see what the market says the project is worth. And then that, after the receipt of bids, then that's 80%. So at that point, the soft costs of the project are 75 to 80% expended, because you have that design in hand, you have those bids in hand, and then you're at the point where you can, but you still haven't spent the majority of the, I mean, you recall from previous slides how the soft cost relates to the hard cost. The hard cost is the real money of building it. And so that's what you would incur after you've made the decision with bids in hand, exercising alternates that may be in place, but then you're making the decision to sign contracts and move forward with construction.
Yeah, that's the 92.5.
Sure, yeah.
Well, and that's when we can decide. I mean, that's another point. Is there a reason if we had the construction documents all done and we went out to bid, I mean, or even if we have all the construction documents done, is there a reason we can't hold on to those documents and say, gosh, this is not a year to take out bonds. We need to wait a year and look at this. We will still have that 5 years if we've gotten the land development approval, and we'll be that much further along when we decide we want to be shovel. I mean, we will be shovel ready. We just won't have put out the bids.
Yeah, you have the option to reject the bids at that point and not enter into construction contracts. And then the risk you run at that point is if something changes again with the building code that would require revisions to the drawings, you're going to fight inflation to putting it off. You know, so there's risks at each stage, obviously, but they change. But those are points in time at which you as the board make the decision whether or not to move forward.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Can I just say one thing, because I know a number of members of the public may not have watched last week's meeting, and I think we talked about it ad nauseum there, but the designs that everyone saw this evening, for anyone who's a fan of the pool or wants to see what those classrooms might look like, that's not the level of design we're doing this week, or we're talking about this week. We're talking about essentially the footprint. It's the concrete and new structures that would require land use approval. All of that will come in another phase. We haven't forgotten it. It's still getting done. to the extent the project gets done.
Correct. Good point.
Can I just say something to that point? Would it be helpful right now to talk about what happens in that next phase?
Sure. Yeah, in the design development phase, yeah.
Development.
That's where we are meeting with, in this case, we'd be meeting with teams, with athletics, with constituency groups that you would determine appropriate. We're meeting with students, faculty, coaches, community groups, and drilling down into the specifics. Because if you think about it, there's not a lot of repetition in this project. It's not as if we're building a classroom wing with 16 identical classrooms once it's designed. Every space here really needs some very careful special attention. And so it's going to require a lot of meetings. Think of the athletic components themselves outside the footprint of the building, obviously related to all the activities that go on at the fields, and the community use and the athletic use, and just the fitness use that goes on as well. So a lot of meetings, a lot of time spent coming with very detailed designs, a lot of visuals. Again, at the same level you're seeing tonight, that same level of sophistication in terms of the graphics and the visuals can be applied to interior spaces as well. And so it's an exciting time to go through, but it's intense too, because there'll be a lot of work that we're trying to get done in this time frame that we've allotted.
Steve, also in that time frame we're talking about, and it's on the consent agenda for tonight, is bringing Fidavia on. And so maybe it helps to talk about what they look like over the next 3 months till we get to that next milestone.
Sure. Yeah, their key responsibilities in this time will be to review the budget, review the phasing. So another component that we didn't get into in a lot of detail is the thought that's already gone into the phasing of this project over the construction duration. Also, their work will involve then putting together a detailed estimate to accompany the design development plans. So you're not only seeing the developed design, but you're seeing the cost associated with it in the form of the cost estimates. And does that help?
Yeah, I think so. And then their fees are, I think it's somewhere around maybe $18,000 a month if they're engaged fully with us throughout that whole month. But if there's a period of time, let's say they're not engaged with us, or not on a really strong level, once a week or touch up, then it's a fee, an hourly fee kind of billing. So, and we can stop and start it at any time. So that is one more little other component through this phase that is a cost, but it has built into it the ability for us to stop and start that anywhere along the way. So it's not like we have to go 3 months or 9 months or anything with Fidavia to make a break. It's more of a pause. In other words, if they're linked up with us starting now going forward and we did take a pause, they would take a pause as well.
Okay, great. So I'm not sure if we have any more questions. I think the intention, the plan is to incorporate these financial benchmarks into a document that references the timeline. But it just, that was a question that came relatively, late. It came today, I think. And so, Steve, I really appreciate you pulling that information together and being able to answer us verbally. I think, I could be wrong, I think the board would appreciate seeing those benchmarks kind of spelled out in a document that, you know, some of us digest things verbally, some of us by reading. So, you know, we can pull that together. You know, if you could pull that together in a document, maybe work with Bill and Ken and Sarah as chair of facilities to, you know, put it together in a way that you feel is digestible. But thank you for going over those benchmarks with us tonight. If there's not more questions about the specifics of that, I think I'll open the floor up to comments. And then, you know, we can move forward in entertaining a vote. Yes, no, I know, Lydia, you want to share your comments. So why don't you go right ahead?
Boy, thank you. So I'm in a really different spot maybe than some of you, although we haven't really had an opportunity to have a meeting of the minds in a while. So I first want to preface what I'm going to say by thanking the steering committee and the people who put this plan together. You know, what I'm going to say is absolutely no reflection on the level of work that has been done on this. I also want to make it really clear that there's aspects of this plan that I fully support and in fact would like to see expedited. So, and just really to highlight what those are, the ADA compliance features and the bleachers, the safety of the bleachers. However, I do believe that there's aspects to this plan that, in my view, and this is my judgment, my values or whatever, are rather seen as nice to haves rather than are essential for Radnor education. And some of those include, and again, this is just my opinion, some of the classrooms we don't have. I mean, there's a lot of classrooms in here. It's been explained to me why they're there, but it's not part of our educational plan to call for all those classrooms. The extensive workout room, I'm still not convinced that we have to have that. The two-story field house, again, I'm not convinced, but that just my opinion again. But more importantly, what I'm concerned about and what I've always been concerned about is that I view this as a major expenditure for the district. I don't feel comfortable at this time making this kind of expenditure and moving forward with this under the circumstances. And for me, I was uncomfortable to start with. Well, now I'm finding it even more difficult to view plans and documents, you know, sort of virtually, being unable to visit the site, to actually look at things. Also, we have some other facilities projects going on right now. We have our bus barn that we have to, you know, focus on and get that right. That's imperative. We've got the trail. It's my instinct that we should focus on those projects and get them right. I don't want to see us, you know, delve into a whole bunch of stuff, get a whole bunch of stuff going. You know, it's, for me, it's a lot to absorb, you know, what we're doing with everything. And then, you know, this, it sounds dramatic to people who haven't been there, but I have to stress to you, you know, I was on the board when we went through the perfect storm of 2009, where we had, you know, an economic downturn that led to sort of a whole cascading financial problems, which led to us having to lay off teachers. And we don't know what the future holds here, but there are people in our state, as you know, that are pushing for tightening financial budgets, that are saying things that aren't true, but they're still saying it in Harrisburg, that, well, because schools are closed, there shouldn't be any expenditures right now. So to me, I want to make sure we take care of our teachers and our administrators and our staff first and foremost. And so putting that also in light of all the other things we're asking administrators to do, finding as board members that it's challenging to keep up on all these plans, doing everything virtually. I personally not comfortable moving forward with this, considering all the other things that we're trying to do. And I think our focus should be on serving our students, making sure our virtual education, continues at the rate it's been going. And I just don't want us to be overextended trying to do too many facilities projects in addition to all the other stuff we're doing. And that it would basically spare the administration one more major thing financially and in every other way to worry about. So I am voting no on this, and I just wanted to explain why. And I just urge my fellow board members, I'm really heartened to hear you asking, at what point can we stop this? I just think it's way too of an uncertain time to saddle our district with this kind of expenditure. That is just my opinion. Having lived through 2 rounds of teacher layoffs, I don't want to go there again. And so I'm seeing it through a different lens to maybe everybody else. But so I'm voting no for those reasons. But I do want to move forward on the ADA pieces of this and maybe scale back the project. And so, there's parts of this that I want to do, but I'm going to vote no on this particular plan because there's pieces of it that I'm uncomfortable supporting at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. Is there anyone else who would like to, has comments or thoughts they'd like to share, speak at this time? Oh, Bradley, please go right ahead.
Hi, thanks a lot. I'm in a position that's similar to Mrs. Solomon's. I came into this meeting with so much doubt about whether we could responsibly support this project given everything that's unknown about it. There are some differences in my opinions too. I don't view this project as a luxury. I think it's something that we need. And I'm thankful for all of the work that went into it. And when you really need something and a lot of work has gone into it, there's especially in times of uncertainty, it feels all the more important to go forward with something like this. But on the other hand, the lack of information that we have right now is making this very challenging. And a lot of questions I had about timing and financial milestones have been answered tonight with the questions other board members raised. So I really appreciate that. And I don't view us as being at a point where we have to put the brakes on right now, but I came into this meeting heading in that direction because I'm very concerned about this. And before we make a final vote on this, I do have a couple questions I want to ask conceptually. We don't know what's going to happen next year or the year after that. We could see our enrollment go down 20% or go up 20% for all kinds of different reasons. And so one thing I really want to understand is how much the design of this project, the way it's designed, because now we're at the schematic phase where, as I understand it, now we're making a commitment to the scope of the project. And then it goes from schematic to construction documents. So questions about changing the scope, the train's leaving the station for that. And so I'm concerned that if we move forward with the schematics now, we're losing some of our ability to adapt the scope of the project to potentially radically different enrollment situations and financial situations. So I'd like a little bit more information about how much, for example, we have this enrollment study going on right now. And I think there's no way this enrollment study can account for all of the uncertainty that we're facing right now with the economy, with what school is going to look like in the next year or so. So I'd like a little bit more information about that. And then on the other hand, the one thing that gave me some comfort is perhaps at least the idea that, we can move forward with some uncertainty in the background, get to the point where we're submitting to land development, and we get some plans so that we can potentially lock in a few months down the road that we can still use. So that cut the other direction for me. So I wasn't aware of the 5-year grandfathering, lock-in, whatever you want to call it, for land development. So that was very helpful. That actually gives me some comfort. But I would just like a little bit more information about how we can make a commitment to a project that depends on assumptions where we just don't know the answers. Can you assure us that we're responsibly making a decision to incrementally move forward with a few steps, and major changes in those assumptions don't derail the project completely? That's the kind of thing I'd like a little bit more information about before we vote on this.
So I'll jump in, Steve, or go ahead, Bill. I'll just jump in to say that, you know, there's clearly an uncertainty. There's an uncertainty of what we're going to be looking at, like as a country, 3 months from now and 6 months from now. That uncertainty, as we've talked about already, you know, there could be advantages to it, and there could clearly be disadvantages to us as a school district. I think we are poised right now to try to monitor and take advantage of and respond to what will be disadvantageous to us, and we can respond to what could be advantageous with the progression and the plan we have moving forward. That there are milestones where we then can look and decide based on what is going on, both within our community and our district and our economy outside of that, where we can then make those, you know, some decisions based on whether things are advantageous or not to us. The steering committee over the last 2 years has spent a lot of time looking at what is the right size, and a lot of discussion about what's the right size for the different aspects of this program. So I feel confident that the best of our ability, we have right now what we believe is the right size, based on the amount of time and energy we've looked at forecasting, knowing that we had a surge of student population at the elementary level, looking at what our high school, there are no definitives with that right now. You know, a poor economy usually means that public schools gain attendance. So could we be looking at more students? That's something we're talking about. If the economy doesn't bounce back, could we be possibly looking at more students? You know, do we believe that what we have built right now will work? You know, what we have designed, I think we believe that it's the right design because we've spent a lot of time looking at size. We spent a lot of time looking at student population and looking at those pieces. You know, that's, you know, those additional classrooms that are there will help us down the road if we do see more of a surge in our population. But it's hard to give guarantees. So I'll let Bill and Steve, you know, they wanted to jump in, but I don't know if that's helping you, Bradley, but that's just one thing that gives me some comfort, knowing that the amount of work that went into the steering committee, looking at a lot of different options with the size and population.
Thanks, Ken. I was just going to say something very similar, that, you know, be very, very hard to guarantee. I mean, I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen next. I personally doubt that, you know, a lot of the reasons that would have led to the development of these, if you go back 3, 4, however many years, I don't think they go away entirely. And if anything, maybe there's some more needs for space going forward, and there's more room to build. You know, our maintenance shop right now is staying put, but it could be in the future turned into more space if, you know, if we did take on enrollment and needed more classrooms. But if we don't right now, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't think anybody has that crystal ball and knows where we're going to be, but I'd be hard pressed to see us not being back in the physical campus at some time in the next year or two, and with very similar activities. Maybe it looks a little different. Maybe there's more blended learning, where you're doing more away and also as a group. But I don't know that that changes the space that people are in. You know, if this thing went crazy where we're home more, then house building's going to go through the roof. I don't necessarily see that happening. So it's a long way of saying, I don't think anybody knows, but you know, in the 2007, 8, 9, when things slowed down, some of the first projects that came back were more civic projects and college buildings and education facilities. And not that people weren't strapped and it wasn't difficult, but we kept building and developing things that met our needs projecting forward. It's a little philosophical, but it's the best I can offer at this, unless there was a more specific question.
So Bill, I just have to chime in on that because I always laugh whenever my husband and I are doing a project around the house. I always tell him, look at the dog. That's how we divide things up. She's got a head, she's got front legs, she's got a middle, she's got back legs, and then she's got a tail. So, when we look at projects, that's kind of how we break them down. Well, that's how I do. He doesn't think I'm so funny. So I know everybody is always talking about, can we afford the finances? The finances is the tail of this project. It's not the head. We're at the front legs of the dog right now. If we're going to look at this project, we have to look down the road 10 years, not in 6 months of uncertainty or a year of uncertainty. We need to look down the road because in 10 years, when we look back at this project, and if we do it or if we don't do it, we could look at each other and say, do we still need that air conditioning in the gym? And I think we would all say yes. Do we still need accessibility to get people on the field so they can watch their grandkids go to games and replace the bleachers and have accessibility all over? We will all say yes. Can we say, no, we don't need these certain things? Probably we can, but we can't just look at this project and say there's uncertainty here. We have to look down the road because in 10 years, this project is still going to be expensive and it's still going to have a lot of things that we still need. But I don't think there's anything in this project that we can say, we didn't need this and we put it in just because we didn't.
I think that's a good point, Michelle. And another thing too is if we looked back a year or so at a list of things that would be accomplished, that need to be done, that would be accomplished during this project, and if we had to pause and do them piecemeal, there's that risk of them being in the wrong place or being the wrong size, and then you're throwing good money after bad in the long run. So again, we don't know what that long run looks like, but we have to be hopeful that we're coming back through this, we'll come out of this, and eventually move forward. So we're working on this master plan right now so that all those things that do get and do need to get addressed can get addressed in the best way going forward.
Thank you all. Are there any other comments? Sarah, yeah, go ahead.
I'm happy to go last, but I just looked like nobody else had much to speak up about, so I just wanted to weigh in.
I had a few comments, but I'm happy to defer to you.
No, you go ahead first. That's fine. I'll go last.
Yeah, no, that's
just
what I
from
want.
a facility standpoint, that's fine.
Sure. So I, of course, want to thank and acknowledge everyone who's worked on this. And, Steve, thank you for your flexibility tonight and, being here and, again, addressing some questions that came in relatively last minute, which are really good questions. I want to acknowledge, all of us that we all know the elephant in the room is the financial uncertainty. I mean, it's not, we don't, all 9 of us have to say that for us to all know that, of course, the uncertainty of our financial situation, the world's financial, the country, however you want to define it, is, of course, on all of our minds. So, I thank you for your thoughtfulness on this. I'm looking at this, I guess, for the long game. The needs that were articulated for us over the last year or so, particularly with the committee that worked on this project, the needs are the needs. Now, I understand that there might be a range of feelings on some of these needs. Some people might view as more of a want, and some view them all as needs. It's okay that there's a range, and if there's a range, that's fine. For me, everything that we're putting forth here is a need. The one thing that we didn't move forward at this point was the garage and the extra driveway, and I think that rightly so, we carved that off and said, let's take a look at that separately. I think we're all willing to be honest that that might be more of a want. But I'm going to tell you, there are people in the community who think that extra driveway and that additional parking is a need. And I respect that they feel that way. What I'm heartened by is to know that even in this time of uncertainty, you know, as Steve spoke to, and I'm glad that he mentioned the vesting, you know, we can go through this process, obtain and secure our approvals through the township, which, by the way, is no small feat. Just let me tell you right now, I don't know if you guys have done land development work here in Radnor, but it's not always the most straightforward process. So good luck to you on that. You know, bring in a compliant plan, you know, zone compliant.
Luckily, Bill has some experience, I think, with that.
Yeah, exactly. Have you worked in Radnor?
Yeah, just last year we did something over at Villanova with them, so.
Okay, yeah, so you know. Yeah. In any event, but the point of the story is that once we obtain the plan approval, it is vested for 5 years. And it does allow us. So what I'm going to vote for this tonight because I still believe in the needs. I feel pretty strongly that we stand a chance of seeing an uptick at all levels. If the economic uncertainty is there, people will come to the public schools. It will be, you know, I think that that's probably true. And so some of our space constraints would be well addressed by this project up at the high school. And I feel comfortable enough that in proceeding with committing to the funds that Steve outlined tonight and getting to a point of plan approval, if the sky were to fall and we made a decision as a board that we had to pause this or shift and phase it in, that is still money that's been well spent. This is a well thought out plan that is driven by programmatic needs, and we didn't just think it up, you know, this afternoon kind of thing. And it will carry us for the long term. And, you know, and we still have some dates where we can continue to assess the situation. I kind of likened it last week. The finance committee, we need to task the administration with working with our bond counsel to, you know, look at the markets and give us their best information, their best guidance on, you know, what's the best mechanism for funding this. And then, you know, turn to our administrators. I'm glad Michelle's on the call tonight, and Ken and the rest of the administration, to then task them with what's the best way to pay for this. You know, there's still lots of work to be done. That work needed to be done whether or not this financial uncertainty existed. That's the reality. That work still needed to be done, and the market conditions have changed. That is absolutely true. But the other market conditions that may have changed is that, you know, the market that, you know, oil prices have dropped. That will, I think, positively impact some of the costs of this. I think it will be to our benefit. The labor market will be itching for some work. So we don't know what we don't know yet about that. And I still feel comfortable with proceeding on the timeline, knowing that we still have some additional spots in the timeline where we could make a different decision if we need to. But I still think that we have to, you know, there's still work to be done there in terms of the financing piece. And I'm heartened by, you know, our bond counsel has done well by us. That bond refinancing that we're approving tonight on the agenda, they initially estimated that was supposed to save us in the neighborhood of $700,000. Well, they, you know, watched the market and found conditions favorable enough to basically double those savings. And that's been a pretty consistent, they have a pretty consistent record. Now, maybe they do a really good job, Bradley, of managing our expectations when they bring us what they're estimating they're going to save us. But be that as it may, you know, we make a decision to move forward with their guidance, and they have done well by us. So I'm going to defer to chair of facilities now, but I understand the hesitation. We all are feeling it. I think it's a really normal thing to feel, but I'm falling back on my core belief that the issues that we are addressing up at the high school are going to be here. They're not going away just because of the COVID virus and the financial uncertainty that exists out in the world right now. So that's it. Sarah, I'll defer to you now.
I thank you, Susan. You actually covered a lot of what I was going to do, so you saved everybody listening to me. I wanted to cover a couple of concerns that both Lydia and Bradley raised. I think, as I recall, and Steve and Bill can correct me, but the enrollment study that's being done, the capacity study, I think we gave specific instructions and requested that you go back and look at times when there have been economic strain in the local economy. So like 2008, 2001, it's not going to be a perfect, match, but it would help you get some kind of indication about what our enrollment spike might be. Again, if people suddenly find themselves unable to afford some of the other educational opportunities in the area. So I'm hoping that you're right, the enrollment numbers won't be perfect, but I think that the capacity study, it's wonderful that we're doing it. It's a shame maybe we didn't do it earlier, but we wouldn't have had this information. So maybe it'll be more accurate given that we're in the midst of what's going on and we know to focus on potential economic downturn. Lydia raised a couple of different projects that we're working on from a facility standpoint, the bus barn. Just to clarify for anybody who's not clear about that and the public who's watching, that's being covered by our insurance money. So that's not money we're spending out of district funds. It is certainly something that takes up administrative time, but it's not tax money we're spending. In addition, the trail, again, is time and focus, but it's not money we'd be spending. That's a grant that the township has obtained from PennDOT. So it's not competing with this project from a financial resources standpoint. I very much trust Ken. I know Bill is new. I know this has been, I think he's drinking from 6 fire hoses, not just one. But I do know that Ken has told this board in the past when he feels overloaded, when we're asking for too much, when we're putting too many projects on his plate. And I would hope, and I'm saying it here publicly, please tell us, Ken, if this is too much at some point, whether it's too much now or too much down the road. I trust him to curb our enthusiasm in the appropriate times and say, look, this is not something we can get done. But I'm not worried about that until Ken tells me we should worry about it. Like Susan, I'm concerned about making sure we have the capacity to accommodate the students that come back. So I am focused on making sure that we have that. But I want to reassure the teachers who I'm sure are watching tonight and were shocked when you mentioned layoffs. I personally would never vote to put up a building and lay off teachers. I'm not asking for a straw vote of the board members here tonight, but I can't imagine, Lydia, that this is a group of people who feels that a brick and mortar structure is more important than the people who are working with our students. So I feel it was unfair to people in the community to say that, because I just think that that's not something we would ever do. Lydia, it was a different board in 2009, and we ended up with a surplus when they laid off those teachers. So I'm just telling you personally, I can't see us doing that. I don't see that being Ken's approach. I think we know that ultimately we'd probably rather have kids crammed in some classrooms than not have teachers in the classrooms with them. But I don't think that that's where we're headed. And that's why we are frankly grilling our architect on what will it cost here, what will it cost there, because we need to know dollars and cents where we can step off this if it looks like we're heading down a path where we're going to have to do things like cut off teachers. I won't vote for it in lieu of keeping teachers. That's not me personally. And I wouldn't even approve this phase if I really thought we were going there. But I do think that we can do this responsibly. I think it's important to have this project and have it for a 5-year, if we can't do it right away. The capacity issues in this district were well known in 2013 at the elementary level, and nobody dealt with it. And now we have a problem, and we still can't deal with it because we're still gathering information. So I think it's irresponsible from my standpoint. I would feel irresponsible not giving this administration and future boards an opportunity to implement this plan if they want it. It's a very, very meaningful plan to our infrastructure at the high school. That's my 2 cents, but that's why I'm voting for it.
So I just have to respond to one thing you said. I am not in any way implying that anyone on the board is choosing this over teachers. What happened in the past is that we had financial constraints. We had Act 1, this was all the money we had, and our expenditures were above that. And so choices have to be made. And so it's a bit of concern about, we don't know what our finances look like. And school finances are really complicated. So you don't know when your revenue stream all of a sudden is much lower than what you think it's going to be.
It may be
I'm not saying any of you are preparing to lay off teachers because of this, but we really don't know what the finances are going to look like. And also, we don't know what Harrisburg is going to do. And Harrisburg has been a thorn in our side in the past before, too.
That's
so
true.
We don't know any of that, Sarah. And I'm not saying any of you would intentionally do that. What has happened in the past is those things have been out of our control as a local board. And so
I agree. But I think we've talked about this in the finance committee meetings. I think we're trying to be very responsible. We have a number of different levers. We have a very creative, within the bounds of the law, financial director. Michelle has been very good about helping us figure out that there's this escrow fund, there's this fund. And look, I'm not interested in depleting all the savings we've got for the district any more than I want to do it at home. But the reality is we have rainy day funds. We save for situations like this. So I'm very hopeful that this is a township and this is a group of people who can be very responsible and make sure that we weather this. I'm sure Ken has already met with his team about ways to plan for the downturn that is likely coming. That's all. I think it's already here, but we just don't know where it will bottom out.
And as we all, and it's great that we're taking the time to have this thoughtful discussion, and you know, thank you, Steve, for letting us grill you. You know, your work has been, I think I speak for everyone, but I'll speak for the administration and myself. You know, your work and your responsiveness with your work has been just great, and your whole team. So we do appreciate that. And please don't take the grilling as anything but that we want to make sure we're understanding the finances from all different ends and understand the uncertainty. And as we talk about school district budgets and we talk about our funds, you know, and I often talk about buckets because it's just, you know, my simplistic mind in the different buckets. You know, the reality is that as a district, we have to do it all. What I mean by doing it all is we have to make sure, you know, we are people intensive. So we have contracts and salaries for our people, our staff. We have buildings. We have buildings that we need to make sure that we are keeping those buildings not only up to code, but making sure that those buildings are appropriate and are constructed and maintained. There are things we will do when it comes to buildings and structures where we will float bonds where we would never recommend. Michelle would never come to us and say, let's float a bond for salaries or for things like that. So there does come down to a very nuanced but a very important discussion that we have each year about how we look at our total finances and how we use portions of that budget for different things and how it makes sense to use a float a bond in some areas where it wouldn't make sense in other areas to float a bond, when it makes sense to use some of our fund balance at different times. All those pieces are part of the levers that we'll continue to look at and we'll continue to discuss as we move forward. From an administrative standpoint, this project is not, you know, an overload from administrative, but I'm always good at being, you know, giving, you know, talking about other people's time and other administrators' time. But in all seriousness, I think we can handle that from that aspect. I think we have plenty of opportunities in the next couple of months to still monitor what is happening as we move forward. So I just want to thank everybody for, you know, these thoughtful comments and discussion, because it's important. We need to look at these things from all angles as we move forward and continue to do that as we move forward with this project.
Okay, Ken, thank you. I'm glad that as the 10th board member, you got an opportunity to weigh in again. And, you know, unless there's further comment, I would like to go ahead and call the vote here in a moment. But, you know, again, I want to just acknowledge that the tone of the conversation has been, you know, a good one. We can all, you know, don't always have to agree. I think we continue to show people on a monthly basis that we're not always going to agree on things, and that's okay. You know, it really is okay. So with that, I'd like to call the vote. All those in favor of the moving forward with the recommendation of approving the schematic design, please say aye by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, and the motion passes 8-1 with Lydia Solomon opposing the vote. They asked that I point that out, Lydia, I think, just to make sure we could see it on the screen. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Steve. I think we'll see you back. And, you know, I think the board should be well prepared. We are going to continue to have updates about this, the financial components, and you know, at every step of the way, we will keep the board well apprised so that we can continue to make good decisions there.
Susan, can I make one quick comment? Moving
Sure.
forward, and now that we've approved it, I just asked that in this next phase, I think this is the right time to say it, that in the design development phase, when you're doing all the specifics, that we keep sustainability, just that reminder again, that we keep that in mind in the next few months as we're looking into that, as I think it's a important at least for me, a priority.
Oh, no, Liz, thank you very much. No, I really appreciate that focus there.
Can I just say that our student, Allie, who's on our committee, already reached out to me and Bill after the last facilities meeting with the same comments, Liz. And remember, we had a group of students who came to February. Those students as well are looking at this project through that lens, and they want to have further conversation. And Mr. Dole and Bill has already reached out to Allie, and you know, in the next couple of weeks, they're going to be talking about it. So yes, Liz, that it's a good comment that, you know, even from a student perspective, we'll be following up on.
Liz, we have no fewer than at least 3 very passionate high school students that have been trying to get meetings with me about that. And so I'm taking those and setting them up. And I'm more nervous about their questions than I was about our questions here tonight. So it'll be taken very seriously.
Can I just ask a quick question to Steve? Given the situation we're in, do you plan to meet with these stakeholders, is it virtually? Because you talked a lot about talking with the teams, obviously they can't do it in person. You feel comfortable moving forward with these meetings virtually? I'm sure people will be engaged, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I appreciate your understanding on that. It does have its challenges. I'm frankly been pleasantly surprised at how well everything has been working. I mean, certainly as you know, somebody leading a firm, you know, going into this, I personally just wasn't sure how it would shake out. It was new territory for everybody, but I've been thrilled with how well it's been working. Bill and I have been talking about that quite a bit. Not only are we going to be meeting with all these constituency groups virtually, but there are going to be needs to actually get into the building, to look at existing conditions. You have the infiltration testing going on. There'll be more testing going on. So at each point in time, we're going to look at how do we minimize, first and foremost, the need for in-person or on-site work, but then look for creative ways to make it efficient. And I'm confident that we'll be able to do it. There's an amazing ability, and I think the ability to things like the animation that help people to visualize things that are digital in nature and they're digital in how we share them. I think that is all going to help us. So.
Can I ask one question? Bill, you had mentioned the students. Given that this is an engineering project, has there been any contact with our engineering students at the high school and see if there's any role? I'm not trying to displace Steve or anyone else, but I'm just wondering if this is a real world opportunity for students who have a passion for engineering to watch this project, participate. You know, this is hands-on learning that I'm sure they're getting great projects in their classrooms, but this is something that I think would really resonate with them.
Amy, I think that's a fantastic suggestion. I don't know exactly how to make it happen yet, but I think it's great. So maybe I can get with PT and we can talk about ideas, how to engage them and have them watch it and learn. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, Amy, that's a great suggestion. So, you know, Bill, we have the Project Leads the Way courses up at the high school.
Okay.
Yeah, we have it's that whole program, but PT can tell you more about it. And yeah, I every time the kids come up with ideas, I'm always blown away by the things that they think about and come up with. So that's a great suggestion.
Steve, add a zip line into the project now.
Right.
Oh, a zip line. That would be fun. Okay, let's see. So thank you all very much. We're going to continue on in our agenda. Right now we have a roll call vote. It's a request to approve the Delaware County Technical Schools Program budget for 2020-2021. And the recommended action is that the board approves the Delaware County Technical School Program budget for 2020-2021 in the amount of $14,406,225, with Radnor Township School District's portion being $219,381 for the Aston Foldcroft half-day program and $49,097 for the special education technical program, for total budgeted amount of $268,478. And this is, I'll entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
That's a motion from Amy and a second. Second from Jeff Jubileer. And Michelle, do you want to handle this since it's a roll call vote? I just want to say that at the March 10th, 2020 Finance Committee meeting, the committee gave direction to the administration to approve the 2020-2021 Delaware County Technical School Program budget in the amounts I mentioned above. You know, but it does require a roll call vote from our board. So Michelle, can you take it away? Michelle? Great.
So I didn't bring my roll call vote, so I'm just going to go across the screen. Mr. Jubileer.
If you could say aye, Jeff, that would be great. Aye, great, thank you.
Miss Duffy.
Aye. Aye.
Miss Goldman.
Aye.
Miss Dunn.
Aye.
Miss Stern.
Aye.
Miss Monahan.
Aye.
And Mr. Moore.
Aye.
What about Miss Solomon?
Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Solomon, I forgot you. I apologize.
So as an employee of the DCI, you have to abstain from this vote.
Okay, great. So the motion passes 8-0 with 1 abstention in a roll call vote. Alrighty, great. Thank you, everyone. So now moving into the next item is 8.3, a request to approve the Delaware County Intermediate Unit General Operating Budget for 2020-2021. And the recommended action is that the board approves the Delaware County Intermediate Unit General Operating Budget for 2020-2021 in the amount of $9,616,248, with Radnor Township School District share also approved in the amount of $79,197.90. And at the March 10th Finance Committee meeting, direction was given to the administration to approve this budget in the amounts mentioned above. And this is now again another roll call vote. The official ballot shall reflect the vote of each member of the local board approving or disapproving the budget. The ballot will list the names of each voting board member of the local board and the weighted value of each vote, and the spaces to indicate attendance of the board members. The intermediate unit budget must be considered and approved by each local board at a regular or special board meeting. So again, I'd entertain a motion and a second.
So moved.
So motion by Liz Duffy and a second. Second by Sarah Dunn. Perfect. And again, as this is a roll call vote, I will have Ms. Deco run that, please.
Mr. Jubileer.
Aye.
Miss Duffy.
Aye. Sorry.
Miss Goldman.
Aye.
Miss Dunn.
Aye.
Miss Stern.
Aye.
Miss Monahan.
Aye.
Mr. Moore.
Aye.
Miss Solomon.
I abstain.
Did we get Dr. Babson?
I was just gonna say, I think we're missing Andrew.
Oh, he's down here.
Okay. And did he vote in the last one?
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did either. We'll have to check with him when he gets back on the screen. Dr. Babson, are you available? You know, he's away from his screen. So and Michelle, I don't think you called his name in the last vote. So why don't we say this for the last vote? It was actually 7-0 with 1 abstention and Dr. Babson away from the dais for the roll call vote. And I think we'll have to say the same for this particular vote. Okay, are we good with that, everybody?
I'm good with that. I got the notes.
Great, okay, super. So now we're gonna move on to approval of the revisions to the 2019-2020 instructional calendar. Oh, this is an action item, okay. Let's see, so I'll entertain a motion for this item and then I'll let Mr. Batchelor take it away. Do I have a motion to approve the revisions to the 2019-2020 instructional calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, and a second?
A second.
Second with Liz Duffy, thank you. Mr. Batchelor, you want to take us through this?
Sure, and I'll invite Dan Bechtold to come in also and just give a quick summary, but I'll begin by just saying, so I talked about the beginning of this meeting. We know that this year we built 4 snow days into our calendar. We talked about, we do not need board action to say we're not using those 4 built-in days. So that's really not the focus as much as that is a sharing that officially, you know, we don't need those 4 snow days because we have attempted, you know, to go online with our instruction and we didn't have any actual snow days this year with those 4 built-in days. So those 4 days were put to the end of the year. We knew at the beginning of the year that we wouldn't have to go to the 18th if we didn't use those days, that our last day would be the 12th. One of the big changes right now is instead of the last day being the 12th of June, we're proposing June 11th because today, which was originally board approved as an in-service day for the primary election, then it got moved to June 2nd. We're planning to be online. So since we're planning to be online, we back up our last day to June 11th. I'll let Dan share with you just some of the other pieces to, I think I might have hit most of them actually. You know, the calendar also shows where we used Act 80 days, which were professional development days. I would like to float out there just for board discussion, if there is any discussion. There is an article in the New York Times today across the nation. Some school districts are ending school early. Some locally are considering ending early because they're doing, you know, education virtually and online. Our plan from the get-go was to try to go to online as quickly as we could and to try to keep our calendar. You know, we kept our calendar in place and took spring break off on purpose because we felt everybody would need the break, but not only everybody needing the break, we also knew that if we instructed through that, we would be ending our year earlier in the off chance that maybe we would find out we were able to come back. You know, unfortunately, it was right at the end of our spring break is when we found out the governor was closing school for the remainder of this, you know, this school year. So there are some places that are considering ending early. We're not proposing that now. We're proposing to try to finish the year as close to what we planned for our instructional calendar. But I am certainly open to feedback as board members and parents if you're hearing anything differently about that. Dan, did I miss anything else about what's in the changes on the calendar that you wanted to mention?
No, I think that you hit everything, Mr. Batchelor. You know, the only thing that I would say is we did add in the dates that were Act 80 days for teachers that were professional development days in March that we used to get online instruction off the ground.
Can I make a request, Dan? I'm sorry, or Mr. Bechtold. There was on 8.4 on board docs a copy of the instructional calendar, and it looks like the document was updated. It's actually a copy of the agenda for this meeting now. Do you have it available that you can just show it on the screen so people see what it is we're talking about? Or does someone else have it that they can present it? I'm not sure.
I will work to pull that up.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that's since been, the board docs now says it's an error, Sarah. So I'm not sure that whatever the link had been, it's not it's not pulling that up anymore. Nothing pulls up. So.
Oh, well, for me, it's pulling up the virtual regular business meeting agenda.
It's pulling up the agenda for me too.
I think there's one in the curriculum committee.
Oh, maybe that's where it is. I did see it, and it's in the curriculum committee meeting.
Well, no,
Okay.
but guys, this has been changed since your curriculum committee meeting. We got
No, in this agenda, the curriculum. Oh no, you're right. It's not. Well, let me look. I saw it preparing for this meeting, so it's here somewhere. That's
So I was able to pull this up. So this was revised. One of the things that was changed since it was posted was the middle section here was reflected to show that TSSAs in April were canceled, and it broke down the fact that we did in fact have the winter Keystone exams, but the spring ones were canceled, and so that was a change since Friday. And the same thing with the senior finals were canceled, but we did have the midterms. So this is the calendar that that was put forward to the board, and we can certainly make sure that that link is live on board docs.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Are there any other questions about this? Because my only comment is I actually didn't think we needed to do another approval of this because the way we approved it initially, we acknowledged that the last day might adjust if there weren't snow days. But
No, the only other question I had was what's a half day in virtual school?
Yeah, well, and that's a good question. And it'd be half of what we're doing right now. Sorry to be a wise guy. I would say we're voting on it because, and here's the thing. The one thing about this time period we're in, everything is constantly changing, and new information comes. I didn't get a chance to chime in during the graduation discussion, but we received guidance today from the governor and from the health department about what they think about us holding graduations in July and August. And basically they came out and said, districts that you think you're going to do that in July and August, you're not, is what basically the health department came out and said today. So there's information is constantly changing that's impacting us. You're voting on this not because of the 4 snow days we're taking away. We are adjusting the calendar instead of June 12th being the last day, saying June 11th, that's an adjustment. And you are affirming the Act 80 days. The Act 80 days are the professional development days. So when we first went online that first week, we took 3 days for professional development with our teachers to get our program up and running. So those days that we use for the professional development, we're just affirming those in our calendar. We can certainly make this vote next month as well, but I think our parents want to know. The only thing before you take the vote, I would just like to hear from the board. Have there been any talk or any question, or do you think we should be ending a day or 2 earlier than what we are, or should we stick to what is our normal calendar? Is there any feedback, or has that been a topic of any discussion? Different school districts have been reaching out to me. Some are looking at ending early. They're looking at ending a couple of days earlier.
Bradley, go ahead.
I'm not going to answer that exact question, but a related question I have is, so as a matter of principle, I think we can all at least agree that in-person days are a lot more valuable than the online days we've been doing, even with the incredible effort we've put into the online instruction that we have so far, and even with the continual improvement that we've made. And if the public health situation had been different, hypothetically, it's not, that ship has sailed. But if I thought we were coming back and if we could have been coming back in June, I would have been thinking going later into the year, getting more in-person days would have been great. Even beyond June 12th, June 18th, June 30th, whatever it was. So that's not happening, and who knows what's going to happen in September. Given that we don't know what's going to happen in September, what does it look like if we have a need for serious, maybe even transformative professional development over the summer to get ready for an uncertain situation in September? I'm not sure that necessarily pertains to this vote about the instructional calendar, but how much are we boxing ourselves in and preventing us from using time between June 11th and September, or maybe even time we have now between the end of April and June to be ready for a very uncertain situation in September.
That is exactly how some districts are looking at it. They're looking at that opportunity to end school a day or two earlier, and the ending of school is still time to be spent with teachers on professional development, time on that transformative, planning. The reality is, when it comes to professional development with whoever our staff is, there's never enough time. You always want more. You always want more opportunities. So that is the piece to that. We are buying ourselves by going to June 11th. We get an extra day. We get an extra day that we can use at the end of the year towards professional development. There's another day after that that is part of the contract with our teachers. And then we do have a couple of days built into the start of the school year as well. But that would be the discussion for if we backed it up even further. It does give us as a district more flexibility, and that's why some districts are looking at that. I would say districts that didn't jump as quickly, for a lot of different reasons. This is not a criticism. For a lot of different reasons, didn't go online right away, are now looking at spending more of that time during the, ending a little bit earlier and spending some of that time during the summer. We have been giving professional development throughout these days. So as we jumped quickly on the online learning, we have continued to give a lot of professional development to our teachers, during this time as well.
Okay. Is there any other comment?
I guess I'm confused about how we could end earlier. I mean, I know that there are extenuating circumstances, but I thought we had certain numbers of educational days and hours to meet, and I want to make sure that we're complying with those requirements.
So right now, by going to the days we're going, we've added some Act 80 days, but we essentially are staying with what we set out as a calendar. The reality is the decisions by the governor and then the Secretary of Education, the hours and days do not matter for this year.
Okay, Ken, just to go back to my question, I'm not hearing anything anywhere else from parents one way or the other. I think, a lot of folks are just all doing the best with what's in front of them regardless. So I haven't heard anything one direction or the other. So if you're recommending this June 11th date, that's fine. I just wanted to give you a chance to tell us if you wanted something a little different because of what you would value as the superintendent for professional development between now and the end of June and whatever else that looks like for what we have to potentially face in September.
I'd like to second what Bradley just said there, just in terms of, parental and just sort of taking, just kind of a general impression among elementary school parents or, in the community. Just want to echo that. Yeah.
Ken, can we kind of, following up on what Andrew and Bradley just shared, and Bradley, I really appreciate your thinking there. If we approve this calendar tonight, and then you were to come to us at the May meeting, and you'll be informed by 4 more weeks of online instruction, however that informs you. And if you were to come to us in May, and there's more information that informs what the fall might look like, or there's more information that might inform how this year is going, there's nothing that would preclude you from saying to us in May, that calendar we approved last month, I'd like to make a change. There's nothing that would prevent that, correct?
Correct. There's nothing that would prevent that. And one of the variables is graduation. What do we want to do on that day? We were thinking, there was a lot of thought about, could we hold something in July and August? That's not, it's honestly not looking very good right now.
Right.
And that committee is going to look at things. There might be things on that day, that Wednesday where we originally had graduation, we might do that might be impacting our whole community, K-12. If we want to do, some parents had suggested maybe some type of parade that day with kids in their cars, maybe an opportunity. There's a lot of different things we're looking at. So that could impact our calendar too, in a sense, because that could, that could involve teachers and others, whether it's remotely or however it is. So yes, to answer your question, Susan, we could certainly come back, and this feedback is helpful. You know, I don't know that it makes, if we adjusted a day or two here or there, or, you know, a day or two or three at the end, I'm not sure we're throwing parents off at this point.
Well, I guess that was kind of my point, is that if we haven't all learned by now that, you know, things are subject to change, period, end of story. That's how this year, I think, can be the best characterized, is that things are subject to change. And so, you know, if you go with this for the plan now and something informs you that you think you need to change it, I mean, that's my personal thinking, is don't let tonight's vote stop you from making a different recommendation to us if there's something that comes up in the month of May that has using those days differently make more sense. I'm not sure, I don't think that we can carry over Act 80 days. For instance, you know, so if you were to stop school 2 or 3 days earlier, you'd have to use those professional development days before the end of June, correct? You can't say to them, hey, those 3 days we didn't use in 2020 school year, come back, you know, 3 days in July or 3 days in August, we're going to use them then, right? Or maybe you can, I don't know.
Yeah, there's certainly things we can look at, you know, and there's certain things we could look at how we do that. There's a lot of different options we could look at.
Okay, all right. You know, is there more, are there any more questions about this?
I just would like to keep in mind, while I appreciate pushing it off till May, like saying if we really need a change in May, tell us. I think the teachers have put a lot of effort into fitting the curriculum they've got into the time they've got. And I want to be mindful that we haven't asked them to do that and then suddenly, you know, shift again. So I just would ask that if we're going to make that change, that we're mindful of communicating and making sure that that's not another huge disruption for a teaching staff that has already, you know, gone the extra mile or 10.
No, I think that's a good point. That's why I said if something happens in the month of May that informs him to make a different recommendation.
Yeah.
So that would be a piece of it.
Yeah. What was driving us administratively, what has been driving us, is that we really wanted to honor as best as we could our calendar. And yes, you know, our online is not, it's not the face-to-face instructional program, but we are committed to making sure that we are engaging our students and continuing to engage and grow our kids, and we didn't want to shortchange it also. But at the same time, there's a whole host of variables and things, and you know, I had this conversation with my wife, you know, just saying, gosh, you know, with our kids at home, would you want to just end it a day or two earlier? And does, like Bradley brought up, the benefit of what you might get by a day or two earlier give us? So we'll stay open to that, but I think we can move forward with this, you know, decision tonight and stay open with it and take into context that, you know, our teachers and our parents do want to know when things are going to end.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no further discussion, I will call the vote. All those in favor of the recommended changes to the 2019-2020 calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. The motion passes 9-0. All right. So we're going to move into our consent. Thank you, Dan. We're going to move into our consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. With the consent of all board members, they are therefore grouped and approval is given in one motion. In the event a board member wants to discuss any item, the board president will move it to an appropriate place on the agenda. Do we have any items that anyone would like to pull tonight? Yes, Lydia.
10-5, please.
10-5. Okay. Are there any other items that anyone would like to pull? Yes, Andrew.
I'll pull 13.1.
Okay, 13.1. Anything else? All right, so with that, I will entertain a motion and a second to approve items 10.1 through 14.1 minus items 10.5 and 13.1. May I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Lydia, and a second?
Second.
Is that Jeff? So that was a motion by Lydia and a second by Jeff. All righty, thank you so much. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes 9-0. All righty, Lydia, you pulled 10.5.
Right, I have to abstain from this vote as well.
Right.
Because I'm an employee of the IU.
Okay, great. So let me go down to 10.5, just a second. So with that, I will entertain a motion to approve item 10.5.
So moved.
Who said that? So moved?
Amy.
Amy, great. And a second?
Sarah.
Great.
Like a
So a
game
motion
show.
from Amy and a second from Sarah. I'm sorry, you know what? They asked me tonight to make sure to say that in case it can't be seen on the screen. So, and I'm sorry I went away there for a second. I'm writing on my agenda, so it causes my screen to go away. All right, so take a motion and a second to approve item 10.5, which is the appointment of the Delaware County Intermediate Unit Board of Directors. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, the motion passes 8-0 with 1 abstention. Okay, super, and now, sorry about that. Let's see, the other item was 13.1. Andrew?
Sure. I just want to make a very quick comment that I think that this is quite an important resolution. And I think one reason is that the charter school law that we're running on was written 23 years ago. And I think many things have changed since then. The funding formulas, the potential inequities that happen with that, the way that charter schools are funded now. I think that this resolution is very timely. So I just wanted to mention that real quick.
Okay, great. Let me go back to my screen. Super. Thank you for that.
Susan, may I add in a couple quick things on that too?
Sure.
If
Well, hang on. Let me do this before you, because Andrew pulled it. Let me take a motion, and then if there's any comment or conversation about this vote. All right. So, Andrew, do you want to make a motion to approve 13.2?
So moved.
And a second?
Sorry, it's 13.1, just so we're clear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. I circled the wrong one. 13.1, a motion from Andrew and a second from Lydia. All right. Yes. Amy, go ahead.
So with the passage of this resolution tonight, we will be joining 217 other school districts in Pennsylvania who have already passed this resolution. So I just wanted to put that out there. And when Andrew said timely, it is very timely because much of the education budget that Governor Wolf proposed pre-COVID was contingent upon charter school reform. And I just want to be clear for anybody who's watching that this is not an action to say charter schools are bad or put them out of business. This is simply that there is really a challenge with the funding mechanism for them. And this motion that school districts across Pennsylvania are making, because we do pay for charter school tuitions, is to just make sure that those tuitions actually reflect the cost of educating the students, whether they be in brick and mortar or cyber settings. And Governor Wolf's proposal this year for for funding education is predicated, like I said, primarily on getting this funding formula revised. And it's in our interest to make sure that we all support this. Otherwise, the money that's been put forth to help fund us is not going to happen. So at least that was pre-COVID. So appreciate everybody's support for this. And I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think that you guys brought this through GRCC last month, right? And then we did a very shortened, abbreviated agenda in March. So normally we would have brought this through last month. So thank you for your work on that, your committee. All right, is there any further comment? All righty.
I'll just chime in.
Sure.
I'm a former charter school teacher. This is not an anti-charter school resolution. It's to set up a rational funding structure. That's all. So people who support charter schools, who have students in charter schools, we support you in that, but we want to have the funding structure reflect how it should based on student cost.
Bradley, I really appreciate that. Okay, great. Well, all those in favor say aye. And the motion passes once again, 9-0. Thank you all. And let's see. Now we're going to move into reports from our board liaisons. These will probably go pretty quickly. Delaware County Community College?
No report.
Delaware County Intermediate Unit? I think that would be Bradley.
Not for the Delaware County Intermediate Unit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I get that backwards all the time. Amy? Yes.
He can keep me company there if he wants, though. Yeah, the DCIU board met on April 1st. There were no committee meetings. Usually there are 2 meetings a month for the DCIU, the second Wednesday of the month being the committee meetings. We did not have those this month. Basically, everything on the agenda pretty much had to do with dealing with the COVID situation, and much of what will be presented with in the May meeting apparently will be the same. And that next meeting will be on May 6th.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there a Radnor Educational Foundation? Liz?
Yes, we did meet via Zoom. The board did. Most of our efforts right now are focused on the Neighbors Helping Neighbors, which is the program designed for our social workers to help people who in our community who are temporarily incurring financial hardship. So we did, right now we're in the middle of the spring grants process, and the only thing on the agenda coming up is that we will be recruiting for a student rep for the board. It's a 2-year commitment, and it's available to current sophomores. So there will be some communication out posting the application process.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, Delaware County School Board's Legislative Council, that's Bradley.
Yes. So the council met on March 11th. That was our last in-person meeting. If you think about that date, you may not be surprised that some people attended in person, but some people were already thinking they would attend remotely if they would have otherwise attended in person. COVID-19 was not a big topic of discussion on March 11th. The aforementioned charter school funding resolution came up in that meeting. We also talked about the Pennsylvania budget and what had been planned as a PSBA Advocacy Day. The Legislative Council met again virtually on March 27th, and that meeting was focused on the new COVID-19 legislation that went forward, in particular the bills that changed the requirements for the number of instructional days and the authorization and requirement that school districts pay for their employees and teachers throughout the remainder of the school year. Then on April 20th, the council had an emergency meeting that was designed around advocacy around an amendment proposed to HB 974, which would have frozen property taxes, or at least prevented school districts from raising property taxes. So every school district in Delaware County was encouraged to call their local legislators and oppose that particular amendment to HB 974. And in fact, that effort worked, and the amendment did not go forward. I think there may be some discussion later on about some further efforts in that area, but it was important, and we want to all recognize that speaking with one voice about allowing districts to make their own financial choices in these uncertain times is important, and that was a theme of that emergency meeting. The next council meeting will then be on May 6th, and that will also be a virtual meeting.
Thank you. Let's see, we have Pennsylvania School Boards Association, PSBA. Andrew? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. In the latest liaison newsletter, there was some discussion about COVID funding. There was some discussion about how budgets will be affected. Some of the usual topics that you've probably been hearing about. There are, as we've been talking about, there aren't going to be any in-person meetings with PSBA in the near future. And then finally, there's some mention of legislation going on that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the meeting here.
Okay.
We have a resolution teed up for discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Parks and Rec, do you want Sarah? Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but and Andrew, thank you for that update. But may I just make, as the sectional advisor for PSBA, a plug for anyone who has not yet registered for Advocacy Day. Now that we're all sort of confined, there's going to be a virtual Advocacy Day. And Andrew, maybe if you have a moment, you can circulate that information to everybody. It would be really, really helpful in the midst of budget season, that if you can participate in Advocacy Day, that would be great. PSBA will provide everybody with the talking points but it's a great opportunity to practice sort of for this, and maybe going forward it can be a regular rendezvous for us. But just wanted to put that out there because this is really an important day coming up in May.
Sure.
And May 11th, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Parks and Rec. Does Sarah or Andrew, which one of you would like to?
I think Andrew drew the short straw this week.
Okay.
We didn't have a meeting this month either, as we didn't last month. But let me just say, while I have a little bit of airtime about Parks and Rec,
Ruh-roh.
This is why he gets to talk.
please use our parks safely. That's all I have to say. Be conscientious, social distancing, wear a mask, etc. Thanks.
Dr. Babson, I think that was very, very eloquent. Radnor Alumni Council, Bradley.
No, you skipped Radnor page real fast.
Oh, I'm sorry, because it cuts the page off. All right, go ahead,
Okay.
Sarah. Sorry.
No report.
And Radnor Alumni?
No report. Stay safe, alumni.
Yeah, thank you. Radnor High School Scholarship Fund.
Oh, I got a report.
Okay.
I got a report. I got a good report.
Let's hear it, Jeff.
Well, 20 students are going to be getting scholarships next year to go to institution of higher education.
Oh, that's great.
So we're thrilled to announce that in this difficult time, having not met for 2 months. Last meeting was February 18th. No, so February 24th. Committees met virtually. There's a group that interviewed the students, and those students were matched up. Just all breaking news. Just learned this week or end of last week. And so now we are talking about trying somehow, some way to do something virtually to recognize them. Perhaps we'll do it by Zoom as well, because we'd love to meet them. And otherwise, we won't see them in person. We're scheduled to meet May 18th, but I doubt that's going to happen. I hope this is kosher. The amounts of the scholarships are slightly in total for next year, a little under $40,000.
That's great. So normally they have a really lovely reception every year.
I know.
And so that's a shame. And
so,
yeah, that's a shame.
So no, I'm pushing them. There's some people that have been on a long time. Bradley's a member as well. Like we gotta, everyone wants to do something. So I'm gonna make sure that I can do my part. I think all the students would have and I don't want to do it pre-recorded. I don't think that does it justice. So maybe we can meet them one night or one day via Zoom and let everybody know.
Yeah, that's really great. The that's a scholarship. You know, it's $2,000. Like it's either $1,500 or $2,000.
It's mixed.
Per, yeah, depending on the scholarship per year. You know, for the kids. So it's a nice support for them. All right, great. Well, thank you. Radnor Committee for Special Education, Nancy.
Yes, as everyone knows, the committee meets with administration quarterly. We had one scheduled for end of March, which was changed to actually this morning. So we met with Jenny and George this morning. The committee had initiated a survey out to its members on April 14th, just to gauge some of the reactions and responses to the COVID situation. Some of the themes that was shared is with the special ed students, they had some difficulty getting all the work assigned done. Many students were unable to work independently, which has been a challenge. And just the similar messages that we've been hearing in terms of a need for more direct virtual learning. Other topics that we discussed were contingency plans in the event of, you know, what are we going to do with extended school year and possible fall schedule. And lastly, wellness. As you know, it just everyone involved with the special education students, emotional and social learning and well-being is so critical. So we had a pretty long discussion there. We know that there are many parents out there who are struggling or needing some guidance. And George and Jenny wanted to make sure that every family knows that their case manager is always available. So if there are any questions, concerns, or just wanting to run things by them, feel free to reach out to their case manager. And if that doesn't work, George and Jenny are always available as well. Our next meeting, although we usually meet quarterly with administration, we decided under the circumstances that we will schedule something for the end of May. So we should get an update, but we're continuing to communicate with each other.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. So Jenny and George are going to schedule another meeting with that group to connect with them at the end of May. Is that what you said?
Yes, we had one this morning, and then they're gonna be scheduling another meeting at the end of May. So in a month's time.
That's great. That's super. Thank you for the update. All righty. So the reports are done. I'm going to move into new business. Do we have any new business tonight?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up an item. So currently in the PA legislature, there's some legislation that may be moving forward that could impact the ability of local municipalities to adjust their local property taxes in order to help fund education. And so a board member brought up the possibility of us perhaps putting together a resolution to oppose that. And so worked with Michael Petiti and also with Amy, and we talked about it, and we put together a resolution and passed it along to Ken and Susan. And in discussions with Ken, one thing that he mentioned is that local control is a very important issue, and I think even more so in these times of fiscal uncertainty, economic uncertainty. The ability to have local control over one's finances is paramount. So just wanted to introduce this. I know it's sort of it's kind of I won't say sucker punch, but we're winding down a long meeting here, but it would be interesting to hear some thoughts from board members on this.
Okay, did everyone receive the resolution? I think Ken sent it out maybe around 1 o'clock today. I don't know. Did everyone have a chance to read it? Yes. Okay.
And is that something that has been or can be put on board docs now that we're introducing it in new business for the public?
That's a good question. Ken, can it be loaded up live in case anybody's listening to us live and would like to read it?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, we could do two things. One, yes, it can be loaded to board docs. Michael can load it now, to board docs as he's on the meeting with us right now, could put it up there on board docs. That probably makes the most sense. Michael, is that okay with you to go ahead and put that to board docs now?
Yeah, I can add it. No problem.
Thank you.
If I can, just to say for the purposes of very quickly mentioning to the public, anyone who might be watching this, it's House Bills, PA House Bill 1776 and 2431, and they seek to prohibit school districts from securing necessary local funding by mandating a 0%, yes, you heard that right, 0% property tax increase for the fiscal year 2020-2021. I'm glad it came up, and hopefully we can have a little quick conversation about this.
Well, and I'm pretty sure. So, I'd entertain, is this a motion that you'd like to bring forward that we consider this resolution, Andrew?
Yes, please, yes.
So then if you could make a motion and see if we get a second.
Sure, I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
And, yep, do we have a second? I have a second from Liz. Great, so now that it's kind of officially out there and Michael's posting it, we would have to read through the whole, do we read through the whole thing, Ken? I think we have to, right?
No, I don't know that we can, what we could do is maybe somebody could, Chris or Michael could put it up on the screen for a minute, and we could have it up on the screen as we talk about it. I don't think
screen sharing would be great. Thank you.
Screen share the resolution, so anybody who's watching it can see it. We're putting it live to board docs now. So no, there's no requirement to read it all.
I was looking forward to reciting it, but I'll
Well, and I do want to say this, kind of set the scene for this. So I think as Bradley referenced in his report of the Delaware County Council and the House bill, was it 974? Was that the number? That we tried.
That was the previous one, correct?
Right, exactly. So, we discussed this. I think it's pretty likely that between now and the end of the fiscal year, the general legislature, a faction of it, is going to continue to bring forth a variety of bills, seeking 0%. And I'll speak for myself here. It's not that I don't understand where this is coming from. There's a lot of financial uncertainty out there. And if there's a school district out there that feels for their district and their board, that a 0% tax increase or something lower than the index is appropriate for them, by all means, that board and those board directors should pass that. But we get very, we are responsible for 77% of our budget in our funding, in our local tax effort. And that's a huge responsibility. So for me personally, I feel it's particularly important that if we're going to have the local burden, we need to have the local control. I guess that's what it comes down to for me. We have the local burden, we should have the local control to say as a board what makes sense here in Radnor, for our needs, for our students, for our budget, for our and we're ultimately responsible to our constituents. So yeah, that's the best way for me to say it.
And Susan,
local responsibility means local control. So
yes, and for people who aren't tuned into our finance meeting last week, at our finance meeting,
that's where we talked about it.
There was a separate discussion here on what this resolution is, and then a separate discussion is what we are going to do as a school district. And one of the things we looked at was a 0% increase as one of the scenarios we looked at. And I think the board has been very thoughtful in looking at those different options, including a 0 based on what we know right now. So that's a discussion for us individually as a district that's going to continue over the month of May and June.
Right. And, I feel, this will, being mandated to say 0% will hamper our finances. It would hamper any district's finances. But for some school districts, it will absolutely devastate them. They will not, they'll struggle with budget deficits, even with a tax increase. And so, again, for me personally, I think it's an opportunity for me in supporting this resolution to say that, I fundamentally don't believe that the state should be saying what any school district should be doing. It's going to be hard enough for most school districts to make things work this year. And, because we're already under the constraints of Act 1. And this will just further really devastate some school districts and probably many school districts in our state. So that's all I want to say about it. Thank you. I want to acknowledge though Andrew and Amy and Michael and Ken, the idea to bring forth potentially a resolution was given to them yesterday. I tasked them yesterday based on a suggestion from a board member, and you really took it and ran with it and wrote a very well thought out resolution. So the wording of it is very well thought out. Thank you.
So I just I'm mindful of the time. My guess is that all of us are in support of this. If anybody's not, please, I'm not trying to cut off your opportunity to say anything. I think we're all in support of this, but I also think this is it's out of our hands. So I would like to vote for this, but look at the time. I mean, I think we could all talk for a half an hour about why we don't agree with what they're doing, but it's not our decision. So could we just call the vote?
We can. Is there anybody else who would like to say anything?
Well, it may not be our decision what gets done in the Pennsylvania legislature, Lydia, but I think I personally have been emailing the legislators who represent our district. I think it's more forceful and meaningful that it's not me just as an individual, it's a school board and it gets published publicly. And I think, look, I don't approve of Act 1. I think Act 1 puts districts in situations where they can't have years like this, where there's an economic limit and suddenly they can't raise taxes. If they would consider getting rid of Act 1, I may agree to 1 year with no, but the reality is this is our opportunity to, in a more official stance, tell our legislature that we think this is,
I know.
they're meddling in a pot that's not theirs to play in.
I think we're all in agreement. I mean, I think we're all preaching to the choir here, is my opinion.
I would like to say something if after everybody else, if there's anybody else who wants to make a comment. And Jeff, you
two things. It would take me 5 seconds. I want this on the record, though. State legislature, it's called unfunded mandates. Pennsylvania is one of the worst states in terms of helping local school districts with their expenses. And number two, we are elected officials, just like they are elected officials. So we are ultimately, as Susan said, responsible for our constituents and how we vote, and we are accountable. So, you know, we're putting ourselves on the record. I want it out there too. So that's all I had to say in addition. And thank you, Andrew, Amy, Ken, and for helping to put this together. And I wholeheartedly support it.
Well said, Jeff. Thanks.
I just wanted to mention that pretty much having a close ear to the ground, that this is not going to be the only fight we're going to have between now and when the state sets its budget. Pre-COVID, whatever Governor Wolf had put out for us was potentially aspirational. It was less than last year when you back out the stuff that was dependent on charter school funding reform. And post-COVID, or I don't even know if there is such a thing as post-COVID at this point. I mean, who can imagine? We're mid-COVID, I think. We're still going to be fighting. And as school directors, every single one of us it's not just going to be about limiting our ability to decide how we should be funding our local schools based on our needs. There are going to be other things, simply appropriations to basic education that we're going to be fighting for. So this is just the beginning. And I just encourage all of you, again, like I said, another plug to stay engaged. The conversations, we have a very supportive representation in Radnor. We're very lucky about that with our representatives, but we should never take anything for granted. And they benefit greatly from hearing from us and hearing what our challenges are every single day, and every motion that comes before them, knowing what we want them to do for our students. In terms of this particular resolution, and I apologize, having had a little bit of exposure to it before it all came to you, is that I would just like to propose one thing about the title, because it speaks specifically to opposing House Bills 1776 and 2431. There could be 4 more iterations of this, and I was wondering if anybody would be opposed to the idea of just our opposing any legislation that seeks to prohibit school districts from securing the necessary local funding. You know, there could be 3 more bills in 2 weeks from now. So maybe to make it more general and just make our stance pretty universal, no matter what legislation comes our way, I'd like to entertain a motion potentially to just tweak that title.
Yes, I think.
And as we do that, could I just jump in? I don't know if Michael or Chris, I don't know if I have screen sharing capabilities. If Michael or Chris could just share the resolution and put it up, so that way we have it, on the record. I don't know, in this virtual world, we're about to vote on a resolution that we've just posted to board docs, that everybody could at least see it. So in that I want to make sure it's seen. And Mike Christofko, do you want to weigh in on, because this is under new business, under what is the requirements for them to vote?
Yeah, we at least need to check to see if there's any public comment that's been emailed in on this issue. Since it was new business and it wasn't previously listed in the agenda, so that people have an opportunity to submit whatever kind of public comment they have on this particular issue.
So good, thank you. I think it was Michael who did that. So thank you, Michael, for sharing so there's I know the board has it. We just wanted to put it up on the screen for people to see. And then Susan, we can go to you for any other discussion and then circle back to Michael for public comment on it.
Sure, super. So it sounds like we have a motion for an amendment to change the title of the resolution. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Yeah, okay, good. Do we have any discussion on that? All righty, so all those in favor, and Amy, just for clarity, you would just want to change it to opposing any Pennsylvania House bills that seek to prohibit school districts?
I mean, I think it's appropriate just because we've been through.
No, what's the wording? I understand that.
Getting to that. In the bottom, the last paragraph, it would pretty much be the same. Opposes House Bills 1776, 2431, and any other legislation that
Oh, all right. So,
well, couldn't we just simplify it and saying opposing any legislation that seeks to prohibit school districts from securing necessary local funding?
Yeah. Any state legislation.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you good with that friendly amendment there, Amy?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, and we had a second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so the amendment to the title is changed. Michael, I'll let you guys update that, or I can circle back around to you. So opposing any state legislation that seeks to prohibit, and then change it again in that last paragraph is what you were saying, right, Amy?
No, I wasn't suggesting you change the last paragraph.
Oh, adding and any other.
I mean, the last paragraph's fine. I was just suggesting maybe that would be part of the title, but I'm fine. I would prefer just if you're going to not take that part from the last sentence, I mean, the last paragraph, to then just change the title. I like the way the last paragraph reads.
Great. Okay, fine. And then back to your point, Michael, do we have any public comment before we call the vote?
No public comment.
Okay, so unless there's any further any board comment, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
And as Lydia suspected, the motion passes 9-0 with the friendly amendment there. So thank you, everyone. Oop, let me close that. Now I'm going to move
off screen sharing now, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll let Ken, I'll trust that we'll let you guys make the change and repost it onto board docs, recognizing that it's been passed. And now we can move into board announcements. Let's see, our next round of virtual meetings will be Policy, Finance, and Government Relations and Communications Committee meetings on May 12th, Tuesday, May 12th, beginning at 5 p.m. And those will be run virtually. We'll have a Curriculum Committee meeting and a Facilities Committee meeting on Tuesday, May 19th, beginning at 5 p.m. And again, those will be virtual. And our next regular business meeting will be Tuesday, May 26th at 7 p.m. And that will once again be virtual. Michael, do we have any additional public comment that came in via email?
Nope.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. If I have a motion from Sarah and a second from Andrew, all those in favor? Motion passes 9-0. Our meeting is adjourned, and we will be going back into executive session. So Ken, I guess we'll look for an email from you.
Yes, I will send you a link in just a moment.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you, everyone in administration. Appreciate your help.